Hi everybody. Tonight, let us embark on a soft, drifting journey into a story whispered across the silent sands of Nevada. A tale so curiously veiled in mystery that it has echoed through decades like a half-remembered lullaby. This is a story about the hidden truths and the delicate shadows surrounding what Americans have quietly concealed about UFOs in the enigmatic heart of Area 51. We shall unfold this narrative in gentle, unhurried chapters, each a whispered page turned under the quiet hush of night. As we begin this first chapter, allow the world around you to dim, your breath to slow, and your heart to settle into the steady rhythm of wonder and curiosity. Our story finds its soft beginning in the early dawn of the Cold War era, a time when the world seemed to hold its breath beneath the quiet hum of unseen engines and the silent flight of things not yet named. In a far and silent stretch of the Nevada desert, surrounded by ranges of silent, stoic mountains, lay a dried lakebed known simply as Groom Lake. At first glance, it seemed little more than a scab of cracked earth beneath the relentless gaze of the sun. No towns, no wandering travelers, no curious eyes. It was a place so perfectly forgettable that it became the ideal cradle for secrets. In the early 1950s, a time when whispers of Soviet spies and nuclear shadows haunted American dreams, Groom Lake was quietly claimed by the government for the testing of advanced aircraft, or so the official story would go. But beneath this veil of military necessity, something far stranger seemed to stir. The first to notice were not soldiers nor scientists, but rather the quiet folk of the neighboring small towns, ranchers, miners, and long-haul truckers. They began to speak, in low, uncertain voices, of lights that moved against the night sky with a grace and silence that defied explanation. Orbs that darted, hovered, then vanished, leaving behind nothing but the faintest hum, a sound felt more than heard. One such man was Harold Quinn, a cattleman who kept a lonely ranch some 40 miles south of the restricted zone. Harold was not a fanciful man. The hard years of ranching had carved deep lines into his face, and his heart beat with the steady caution of a man who trusted only what his own two hands could touch. Yet, on a warm evening in the spring of 1955, Harold stood beneath a sky brushed with the faint silver of the waxing moon and saw something that would haunt his quiet hours for the rest of his days. He had been walking the fence line, lantern in hand, when a soft blue glow bathed the ground before him. Looking up, he saw a disk, silent, perfectly round, gliding smoothly some 30 feet above the ground. It moved with the serene, impossible elegance of a dream. Harold swore later that he could see no rivets, no seams, no markings at all, and just as softly as it had appeared, it slid upward into the star-scattered sky and was gone. The following day, Harold's story travelled, as stories do in small towns, on the slow, whispered wind of coffee shop conversations and back porch murmurs. Most brushed it off, perhaps a test plane, perhaps whiskey dreams. But then came other voices. A miner, returning late from a dig, spoke of a silver spear slicing silently across the sky. A pair of newlyweds swore they'd seen a light rise from behind a ridge and split into 3 distinct orbs before vanishing with a flash of emerald light. As the months rolled on, the stories wove themselves into a quiet, growing tapestry of unease. Yet none dared speak of it beyond their dusty borders. The desert had always been a place of strange things. That was simply part of its lonely charm. But the truth was far less tranquil. Deep within the heart of Groom Lake, beyond fences rimmed with silent sensors and patrolled by men whose eyes spoke of secrecy, an airstrip took shape. Upon this remote ribbon of concrete, the government tested aircraft unlike anything the world had yet seen. The U-2 spy plane was among the first, a skeletal bird designed to soar higher than any before it. To the common eye, its silhouette at such impossible heights would have seemed wholly unearthly. And yet, beyond even this, there lay darker whispers that spoke not of man-made wings but of things recovered from silent crashes in desolate fields. The name Roswell flickered on the edges of this legend, like the half-heard name of a forgotten song. Though officially dismissed, tales of a craft not born of this earth, and of being small, grey and silent, began to entwine themselves with the growing mythos of Area 51. Within the dim-lit hangars, so the whispers claimed, these artifacts were not simply studied but dissected, mimicked, and perhaps even activated. Engineers who could never speak of their work might glance skyward at a strange light and know, with a quiet, shivering certainty, that it was not entirely unknown to them. Harold, and those like him, would never know what they had truly seen, and perhaps, in some quiet way, they never truly wished to. Some mysteries, they believed, were like the desert itself, beautiful, vast, and best left untouched. And so the years passed as years do, on silent wings. The lights continued, the stories remained soft, hushed, spoken under breath to trusted ears. Area 51 became a shadow, a place where the government tested secrets and perhaps kept them. A symbol of the thin line between truth and tale, between the known and the forever unknowable. Tonight, as we let our hearts settle into the soft rhythm of this story, remember that some secrets are not kept in vaults or behind high fences. Some secrets drift, silent and shimmering, across the night sky, waiting for someone willing to look and to wonder. Let your eyes grow heavy now, for our story is only just beginning. In the quiet hush of the next chapter, we shall wander closer to the heart of those first whispered experiments, and the curious things the Americans may have hidden even from themselves. In the hush of the following year, the Nevada skies grew no less mysterious, though the world outside the desert seemed to spin ever faster. The Cold War's silent chessboard expanded, and with it the need for eyes that could see farther, higher, and deeper than ever before. Yet within the veiled corridors of Area 51, something quietly shifted. The airstrips lengthened, the fences tightened. The guards, once standard military personnel, were replaced by nameless figures with blank eyes and wordless commands. They bore no insignia, wore no standard uniform, men as faceless as the desert itself. They arrived in unmarked buses that left no trail but the soft hum of tires across gravel, and they spoke only to each other, in clipped whispers that vanished into the dry air. But within the vast hangar-like structures rising beyond the known perimeter, something other than airplanes was being brought in. Crates, long, narrow, some oddly shaped, wrapped in tarps or heavy metallic sheeting, came under cover of night. Convoys moved across the desert under an escort of helicopters whose rotors whispered low against the stars. The rumours among the locals began to shift, ever so slightly. No longer did they speak only of strange lights. Now they murmured of strange shapes being ferried under the veil of darkness. One such convoy passed near the edge of Alamo, a small town where gossip passed for currency, and a man's word was weighed by the years he'd earned under the sun. A young gas station attendant named Pete Driscoll stood on the night shift, wiping down the pump handles when he heard the low hum approaching. Expecting a convoy of military trucks, a common enough sight in those days, he straightened, only to freeze at what came into view. The trucks, indeed, rumbled by, but they were flanked by vehicles unlike any Pete had seen. Low-slung, gleaming under matte black paint, with tires that seemed too smooth for desert roads and lights that glowed faintly in hues of violet. As they passed, Pete swore the air grew colder, and a faint metallic scent prickled at the back of his throat. But it was the object beneath the largest tarp that would linger in his mind long after. Its shape, impossible to define clearly through the heavy coverings, seemed almost fluid, a curve where no curve should be, angles that shifted even as his eyes tried to hold them. For a fleeting heartbeat, the tarp lifted slightly in the desert wind, and Pete glimpsed a surface smooth as glass, reflecting not the headlights nor the starlight, but something else entirely, a faint, pulsating glow that felt wrong. The convoy slipped by, silent save for the engine's soft hum, leaving Pete standing alone in the chill air of a Nevada night that now felt infinitely larger and infinitely more alien. Days later, word spread quietly among the town's older folk. Some claimed they'd seen strange men in dark suits canvassing the area, asking soft questions with eyes that never seemed to blink. Others mentioned their radios flickering, caught in bursts of strange static whenever they spoke of the convoy. The message, though never spoken outright, was clear. Curiosity was best left untended. Back at Groom Lake, inside the cavernous hangars, the true heart of the project pulsed in silence. According to whispers that would only surface years later, teams of engineers and scientists, drawn not only from military circles but from secretive research institutes, were tasked with a project whose name never appeared on official documents. They called it only the reverse program. The goal was deceptively simple in phrasing, yet impossibly vast in scope. To take the recovered artifacts, be they remnants of craft, fragments of unknown metals, or devices whose purposes eluded all earthly logic, and unravel them. To learn not merely how they worked, but to replicate them, to weave their secrets into the growing arsenal of American ingenuity. But as the engineers began their work, they encountered an unsettling realization. The materials they handled, metals that defied heat, fabrics that shimmered out of phase with light, responded in ways that seemed almost alive. Tools dulled against them. Conventional scans returned empty data or impossible readings. In some cases, the items themselves changed subtly when observed under certain frequencies of light or radiation. It was as though the artifacts resisted understanding, or perhaps as some whispered in the darker corners of the labs, they were never meant to be understood by human minds. One such engineer, whose name has never surfaced beyond the veil of classified archives, recorded a single entry in a personal logbook before the book itself vanished from all known records. The entry read, "We are not studying this, it is studying us." The project's true nature and the human cost within those silent hangars became a story of its own. Whispers of sudden nervous breakdowns, of seasoned scientists resigning overnight, eyes haunted by things they refused to speak of. Some vanished entirely, names quietly erased from payrolls and personnel lists, as though they had never existed at all. By the late 1950s, rumours swirled within the intelligence community itself. Black-budget projects, hidden even from congressional oversight, funneled millions into Area 51's expanding maze of underground facilities. Entire sections of the base became accessible only by elevator shafts descending into the dry earth, where no prying satellite could ever glimpse the strange things that lay below. The lights in the sky continued, but now some began to wonder. Were they simply experimental aircraft born of human hands labouring in secret, or were some of them something far older, far stranger, and now perhaps awakening beneath the desert floor? In this chapter of our quiet tale, we draw closer not only to the heart of what was hidden, but to the uneasy feeling that perhaps some secrets were never ours to keep. Let your thoughts drift gently now, for soon we shall step further into the labyrinth of shadows that wrapped itself around Area 51, and what those shadows may have been hiding, even from the men who guarded them. In the soft hush of the desert winds, as the final years of the 1950s gave way to a new decade, the world outside Area 51 thrummed with the pulse of progress. Rockets touched the edge of space, satellites began to whisper from the heavens, and men in suits and thin ties spoke boldly of a future shaped by technology. But beneath the shimmering facade of modernity, within the isolated heart of Groom Lake, the shadows deepened, and the strange heartbeat of hidden things grew quieter and far more unsettling. The base itself transformed. Where once stood simple hangars and sun-bleached runways, now a complex web of structures sprawled across the parched earth. Some rose high, housing experimental craft that looked less like planes and more like fragments of a dream half-remembered. Others delved deep. Labyrinthine bunkers bored into the earth, with corridors so tightly restricted that even ranking officers dared not speak of their purpose. And within those walls, the experiments shifted from the mechanical to something altogether different. It began with the arrival of what witnesses later called the cubes. Small, unassuming crates delivered under armed guard, their contents known only to a handful of individuals who vanished soon after their work began. What lay within those silent boxes has never been confirmed, but some whispered that they contained fragments of biological material, not entirely machine, nor entirely organic. The scientists tasked with studying these anomalies entered their work with the confidence of men used to solving puzzles. But what they encountered unraveled that confidence with a quiet, suffocating dread. The materials, when examined under standard instruments, often yielded nothing at all, as though the tools passed through them without resistance. Yet, when left alone, the materials changed. They shifted subtly in colour or texture, defying cataloguing or classification. In some chilling accounts, lab personnel described seeing the materials alter shape when observed peripherally, as though they were reacting to being watched. One researcher, known only by the codename Hart, recorded in his personal notes a moment that would haunt those secret halls for years. He had left one of the samples sealed within a containment chamber, a simple glass box surrounded by motion sensors. At 3:14 a.m., the sensors detected movement. When Hart entered the lab, he found the glass shattered, though the alarms had never sounded. Inside the chamber lay the object, unchanged. But now, a faint handprint, slender and long-fingered, marked the inner side of the broken glass. A handprint far too large for any human hand. Hart resigned the next day. No record remains of his departure. But the experiments did not stop. Instead, they intensified, with layers of security deepening around the research divisions known in whispers as the vaults. It was said, though never confirmed, that entire teams worked in isolation chambers, communicating solely through written notes passed beneath sealed doors. Exposure to the materials, even indirectly, began to correlate with reports of vivid hallucinations, whispers in the dead of night, and, most disturbing of all, shared dreams among separate individuals. Dreams of vast, silent cities beneath cold stars, of watchers with eyes like polished glass, of a great silent presence, waiting patiently beyond the thin veil of reality. Outside, in the clear Nevada skies, the sightings increased. Civilian pilots, ranchers, and even passing tourists began to report objects moving with impossible speed, executing maneuvers no human craft could achieve. Yet every report was swiftly silenced, some with bribes, others with subtle threats. Occasionally, when the witnesses proved particularly insistent, they vanished altogether. By now, Area 51 was no longer merely a testing ground for advanced aircraft. It had become something far darker, a vault for secrets so profound that even those guarding them dared not speak of what they watched over. In the small towns surrounding the perimeter, a quiet dread took root. Families who had lived there for generations packed up and left, citing strange noises in the night, the hum of unseen machines beneath their homes, and lights that lingered at their windows long after midnight. Even the animals, locals said, grew restless. Livestock refusing to enter certain fields, dogs barking at empty air, birds falling silent as strange shadows passed overhead. And yet, for all this, the government maintained its official silence. When pressed, they insisted Area 51 was nothing more than a testing facility for experimental aircraft. And perhaps, on the surface, that was true. But beneath, in the shadowed chambers where men in sterile suits worked under cold fluorescent lights, something far older, far more alien than mere machines awaited understanding. Or perhaps it waited for something else entirely. The few who dared question the reality of Area 51's true purpose began to notice patterns. Those who delved too deeply into the mysteries, whether journalists, curious researchers, or even government officials, met untimely ends. Accidents, disappearances, sudden, unexplainable suicides. A pattern so precise it spoke not of coincidence but of careful, silent design. And still the experiments continued. In the deepest levels of the facility, it is said, they moved beyond passive study. Some believed they began attempts at activation, an effort not to merely understand the alien artifacts, but to awaken them. What they hoped to achieve remains a question buried in the shadows. But what is whispered in the quietest corners of classified files is this: they succeeded. And what they awakened did not come quietly. Tonight, as you let your thoughts drift and your eyes grow heavy with the weight of this soft unfolding tale, remember, some doors once opened refuse to close again. In the coming chapter, we shall draw closer still to those silent awakenings and the strange consequences that rippled from the heart of Area 51, sending echoes into the world beyond the desert. As the dawn of the 1960s painted the Nevada desert in soft hues of gold and amber, the veil of secrecy around Area 51 did not thin. Instead, it drew tighter, woven with threads of fear and a growing sense of unease that reached even those tasked with keeping its silent watch. By now, the base was no longer merely a facility hidden in the sands. It had become something darker, something alive with secrets too heavy for daylight. Within its underground chambers, known among whispered circles as the vaults, the experiments shifted subtly yet profoundly. No longer were the researchers content to observe or cautiously analyze. Orders came, their origin unknown even to the highest-ranking officers on site, to initiate direct interaction. It began with a single artifact, a fragment no larger than a man's palm, smooth, almost translucent, and humming faintly when held in a gloved hand. Its surface shimmered in colours unseen by the naked eye, as though it bent the very nature of light around it. They called it the shard. When placed within a containment field and exposed to low-frequency sound waves, the shard responded. It vibrated gently, resonating with a harmonic pulse that defied explanation. The researchers, emboldened by this reaction, increased the intensity. The pulse grew stronger, rippling outward and affecting nearby instruments, causing oscilloscopes to spike and lights to flicker in rhythmic waves. And then it happened. On a quiet night, beneath layers of concrete and steel, the shard emitted a low, melodic hum, soft, almost like a song. Those present described the sound as beautiful, haunting, and indescribably sad. It resonated within the bones of the listeners, threading itself into the quiet chambers of their minds. For a brief moment, the air itself seemed to shiver. Then the lights failed. What occurred in the darkness of that underground chamber remains a carefully guarded secret, but whispers speak of voices, soft, layered voices, filling the air, speaking in a language none present understood yet, all felt they somehow recognized. When the lights returned, 4 of the 6 researchers stood motionless, eyes wide and glassy, unblinking. The other 2 were gone. No sign of struggle, no trace of movement, no sound recorded. The security footage, later reviewed by trembling hands, showed only static. The 4 remaining scientists spoke of visions, vast halls beneath alien suns, machines that pulsed like living hearts, and beings of light whose silent gaze pierced through flesh and bone alike. The official report marked them as victims of acute psychological breakdown, but within the hidden chambers of Groom Lake, they became known as the Touched. After this incident, the facility descended further into layers of control and isolation. No single team worked on a project alone. Each department was given fragments, mere pieces of a greater puzzle, under the strictest of compartmentalization. No one, it seemed, was allowed to see the whole picture. Yet the strange events did not cease. Across the desert, the sightings of unknown craft intensified. Objects that moved with impossible agility, blinking in and out of existence, as though stepping between the folds of reality itself. Farmers spoke of cattle found drained of blood, their bodies marked with incisions too precise for human hands. Hikers vanished near the restricted zone, their belongings later found carefully arranged in geometric patterns upon the sand. At night, near the barbed wire fences marked with stark warning signs, guards began reporting shadows moving where there should have been none. Drones of unknown origin, smooth, silent, observed patrols, vanishing before they could be intercepted. Even the sky itself seemed to grow stranger, with stars occasionally shifting places, pulsing softly before returning to their rightful patterns. Inside the base, security intensified to levels previously deemed excessive. Retinal scans, voice recognition, DNA keys. Yet, despite every measure, unauthorized access incidents increased. Files vanished. Labs found equipment subtly altered. And worse, some personnel reported seeing individuals within secure areas whom they did not recognize. Men and women who left no record of entry and whose faces seemed, somehow, not entirely right. The command structure grew paranoid. Meetings were held in shielded rooms beneath thick layers of lead and copper, as though trying to block not merely human surveillance, but something else. Something unseen, perhaps something listening. Among the whispered conversations in dark corners, a phrase began to surface. "The others are inside." What that meant, none dared say aloud. But the effect was immediate. Personnel rotated out every 3 months. Background checks extended not only to family but to distant relatives, friends, and even casual acquaintances. Yet even with these precautions, the sense of unseen eyes never faded. It was around this time that a low-level technician, a man whose name has been scrubbed from every known archive, stumbled upon a sealed chamber far below the main facility. Tasked with maintenance on a failing electrical panel, he entered a section marked for experimental storage. What he found was a room unlike any other within Area 51. It was not the sterile industrial space he expected, but a cavernous hall, its walls smooth and metallic, curved in ways that defied architectural logic. The air felt dense, humming faintly, filled with a soft light that cast no shadows. At its center stood a structure, neither machine nor sculpture, composed of interwoven metal and crystal, pulsing softly like the heartbeat of some vast, slumbering entity. He reached for his radio, but it failed. His vision blurred. And then, from the edge of his perception, he heard a voice. Soft, layered, patient. It spoke not in words, but in impressions, feelings. A slow, quiet awakening that reached into the marrow of his bones. He was found hours later, wandering the upper levels in a daze. He remembered nothing. Or perhaps, as some believed, he remembered too much. That chamber, if it ever existed, was sealed, its entrance erased, its existence denied even by those in command. But rumours of it persisted, passed in hushed tones among the night staff, and whispered in the brief moments when the hum of unseen machines seemed to pause. And so, the heart of Area 51 pulsed on, a silent beacon in the desert night, drawing closer those who sought its secrets. And those secrets which perhaps sought something in return. As your eyes grow heavier and the night deepens around you, remember, some awakenings are not ours to control, and some lights in the darkness are best left unchased. In the next chapter, we shall drift ever closer to the silent wars fought in the shadows, and the invisible battle lines drawn between the watchers above and the watchers within. The years rolled forward, carrying with them the slow, relentless march of history, but within the hidden heart of Area 51, time seemed to move differently, as if drawn into a loop of recurring secrets and silent awakenings. By the early 1970s, the world outside sang with the hum of new technologies, moon landings, and whispers of a coming digital age. Yet within the guarded fences of Groom Lake, a different kind of war stirred. One not fought with missiles or armies, but with shadows and quiet terror. It began with the disappearances. They were not the loud vanishings of public figures or soldiers fallen in distant lands, but subtle absences. Men and women whose names had barely passed through the corridors of official records. Researchers, technicians, low-ranking military staff. They simply stopped appearing for duty. At first, the reports were treated with bureaucratic indifference. People transferred, people resigned, people slipped through the cracks. But then the patterns emerged. Each missing individual had, at some point, worked within the lower sectors of Area 51's deepest vaults. Each had been exposed, even briefly, to artifacts classified under a program known by its code name, Project Echo. No files existed on Project Echo in standard archives. Even the highest security clearances revealed nothing but a blank space where its designation should have been. Yet the corridors whispered of it. A program dedicated not to engineering, nor to understanding, but to communication. What they attempted to communicate with remains a secret, shrouded in dread. In fragmented accounts, later pieced together by the few insiders who dared speak in the safety of off-the-record conversations, Project Echo sought to engage with the artifacts directly, beyond mere physical manipulation. They used waves, sound, electromagnetic frequencies, even rudimentary forms of code and symbolic language, in the hope that something, somewhere, might answer. And answer it did. On a night thick with desert fog, inside a chamber shielded against every known form of surveillance, the first recorded response occurred. The signal was not heard by ears but felt, a low vibration that passed through walls, through flesh, through bone. Instruments recorded it as a pattern, a slow, rhythmic pulse that defied known frequencies. But the effect on those present was immediate and chilling. Every individual within the chamber collapsed simultaneously, not dead, not unconscious, but paralyzed, their eyes wide open, pupils dilated to pinpricks, their bodies locked in rigid stillness. They remained in that state for exactly 7 minutes and 13 seconds, a span of time now whispered within Area 51's lower circles as the long moment. When they awoke, they spoke no words. Not at first, but within days, each began to display strange behaviors, patterns of speech shifting into languages unknown to any linguist, writing symbols with trembling hands that when analyzed seemed to carry mathematical properties far beyond human comprehension. One technician, a soft-spoken man with no known artistic skill, began to draw vast, intricate geometric designs that seemed to pulse when viewed directly, giving the unsettling impression of slow, deliberate movement. The images, when reproduced in laboratories, caused instruments to fail and even triggered seizures in some observers. The subjects were quietly removed from the main facility. Official records list them as reassigned to other projects. Those who worked closest to the truth knew better. They called them the Echoed. As these incidents mounted, the command at Area 51 shifted its focus. What began as an attempt at passive study had, by silent consensus, transformed into a containment operation. The base expanded its underground sectors, carving deeper into the Nevada rock, creating levels so classified that even those within their walls did not know the full scope of their purpose. Entire wings were sealed, not for protection against espionage, but to guard against whatever had been awakened. The civilians beyond the perimeter sensed the shift without understanding it. The strange lights grew stranger still, moving in erratic, unnatural patterns. Reports surfaced of beams of light descending from the night sky, illuminating the desert floor in soft humming columns that left scorched earth in perfect circles. Animals continued to behave oddly. Flocks of birds altered their migratory paths to avoid the region entirely. Coyotes and desert foxes abandoned long-held hunting grounds. Even the wind, some locals said, began to move differently around the perimeter of the restricted zone. Quieter, hesitant, carrying a hum too low for human hearing, yet unsettling enough to silence even the bravest of desert dwellers. By this time, those stationed at Area 51 stopped asking questions. The culture within its walls shifted from curiosity to silent endurance. Orders came from nameless sources, often delivered through faceless intermediaries. Some directives arrived sealed within lead-lined cases, opened only by biometric keys. None dared disobey. Yet even with these measures, the phenomenon known among the inner circles as the echo effect continued to spread. One engineer, reassigned from a different project, reportedly fell ill mere days after entering the lower sectors. He spoke of voices whispering from within the walls, not in words, but in slow, pulsing impressions of sorrow and vast, unfathomable age. Before his departure, he left behind a single sentence, scrawled on a wall in his quarters. "It's not that they are coming, it's that they never left." His body was never recovered. At the highest levels of the military-industrial complex, quiet conversations began, not of disclosure, nor of confrontation, but of silent negotiation. The question that began to haunt those in power was simple, chilling, and unanswerable. If something within Area 51 was watching, listening, and perhaps even waiting, what did it want? And how long had it been waiting? The documents from that era remain sealed, their contents known only to those whose names history itself seems to have forgotten. But among the few whispers that escaped those iron walls, one phrase stood out, a phrase that would echo in the hearts of those who heard it, long after the papers were buried and the voices silenced. "We are not the watchers, we are the watched." So the silent war continued, not against nations or ideologies, but against an unseen presence, an ancient intelligence whose shadow fell long and dark across the Nevada sands. As you allow your mind to drift gently upon the waves of this soft, unfolding tale, remember, some wars leave no battlefields, no scars upon the earth, only quiet echoes that linger in the spaces between dreams and waking. In the next chapter, we shall draw closer still to the strange agreements forged in whispered darkness, and the unsettling compromises made by those desperate to control what may never have been theirs to command. As the 1970s gave way to the dawn of the 1980s, the silent heartbeat beneath Area 51 pulsed ever stronger. A rhythm not of engines nor machines, but of something far older and infinitely more patient. The outside world moved forward in the glow of neon lights, satellite communications, and whispered promises of a new technological age. But deep beneath the Nevada sands, a different kind of negotiation began. One not brokered across polished tables or signed with ink, but forged in shadow and bound by silent understanding. The first contact was never announced, never recorded in official transcripts, and perhaps in some haunting way, never truly happened in the way the human mind could comprehend. It began with a signal, or rather a return of a signal never consciously sent. During a controlled test deep within the sublevels of Area 51, researchers working under the blackened name Echo Prime initiated what was intended to be a final experiment, a last effort to provoke a response from the silent artifacts. The plan was to transmit a series of encoded data streams, laced with symbolic logic and fractal patterns, through a controlled energy field linked to the crystalline fragments retrieved years earlier. The transmission lasted precisely 9 seconds. The response came instantly, not in the form of a return signal, but as a presence. All electronic equipment within a 10-mile radius ceased functioning in the same breath. Lights dimmed, generators stalled, and even the steady heartbeat of backup systems fell silent. Within the command room, men and women accustomed to the strange and the impossible felt the cold hush of something entering the room without sound or shape. It was not a voice, it was a knowing. Each individual present later recounted the experience differently, yet eerily alike in theme. Visions of vast, endless corridors filled with shadows that moved against a backdrop of stars untouched by human hands. The sense of standing not before a single entity but a collective awareness woven across unfathomable distances. Thoughts not their own moved through their minds like slow, deliberate waves. One word echoed in every account. A word none could explain nor translate, yet all understood in the marrow of their being. Exchange. The higher command at Area 51, upon reviewing the fragmented reports, responded with measures swift and severe. Access to the lower vaults was suspended indefinitely. The research teams involved in Echo Prime were relocated, dispersed across black sites in a web of secrecy so dense that none could trace the whole. But within the upper echelons, among the men and women who stood beyond official ranks, whose authority lay in the shadows of government and industry, the response took a darker form. They did not recoil in fear. They sought to negotiate. The concept of exchange was twisted, interpreted not as a warning or a demand, but as an opportunity. If something beyond human comprehension sought contact, perhaps it also sought collaboration. And so began the era of the silent accord. No documents were signed. No treaties declared. Yet within the heart of Area 51, experiments resumed, not upon the artifacts, but with them. Controlled environments were created where interactions were carefully staged under the strictest observation. Teams of specialists, selected for psychological resilience and subjected to conditioning beyond ethical bounds, were placed in direct proximity to the recovered items. The goal was clear, though never officially spoken aloud: initiate controlled contact, elicit controlled responses, and in doing so, unlock controlled knowledge. The results were as unpredictable as they were chilling. Some artifacts reacted with passive indifference, their dormant nature refusing any form of interaction. Others, when engaged under specific environmental conditions, isolated sound frequencies, electromagnetic fields of precise calibration, responded with brief but undeniable signs of awareness. But the most unsettling phenomenon arose when the artifacts remained untouched. On more than one occasion, sealed containment chambers were found altered. Not opened, altered. Walls curved in impossible ways, metal surfaces etched with symbols that resisted every known method of analysis. Patterns appeared on floors and ceilings, shimmering faintly before fading into the walls, as though absorbed by the structure itself. And in the rare moments when human presence coincided with these occurrences, the observers spoke of feelings: profound sorrow, immense curiosity, and in some rare and terrifying instances, hunger. The higher command decided to escalate. They introduced not only controlled experiments but unsanctioned ones, involving human subjects who were never told the full nature of what they faced. Civilian contractors, low-level military staff, even prisoners brought in under sealed orders, were exposed to the artifacts under varying conditions. The outcomes ranged from benign indifference to catastrophic psychological collapse. One man, exposed for less than 90 seconds to a fragment housed within Vault Sector 7, began speaking in a language unknown to any interpreter. He continued without pause for 13 hours, his voice growing hoarse, yet never faltering. Upon cessation, he fell silent and died moments later, his expression serene, his eyes reflecting what some later described as a sky not our own. Another subject entered a containment room with nothing more than a clipboard and was found moments later seated on the floor, eyes wide open, whispering softly, "I saw myself watching me watching myself." He vanished 3 days later. The footage of his disappearance, recorded on a secure camera feed, showed him walking into a blank wall and passing through it as if it were mist. These events, though meticulously hidden from the public eye, created ripples within the inner circles of military intelligence and covert scientific research. Some within the highest ranks grew fearful, advocating for the termination of all contact and the destruction of the artifacts. Others, intoxicated by the lure of forbidden knowledge, pushed for deeper engagement, convinced that understanding, or even controlling, these unknown forces could redefine the future of humanity. What none of them considered, at least not openly, was a chilling possibility whispered among a few of the oldest hands within Area 51's blackest operations. What if the artifacts were not machines? What if they were the emissaries, fragments of something greater, watching and waiting, sent across impossible gulfs of time and space, not as tools, but as eyes? And worse, what if they had already decided that humanity had nothing left to offer but itself? So the silent accord continued, a dance of shadows upon the edge of a precipice none could fully see. As your eyes grow heavy with the soft rhythmic pull of this unfolding tale, know this: some bargains are made not in words or signatures, but in the silent understanding of those who believe they can dance with the dark and remain unchanged. In the next chapter, we shall drift further into the whispered betrayals and unseen alliances forged beneath the sands, and the chilling glimpses of a future forever altered by secrets meant never to be known. As the 1980s unfolded beneath a sky divided by the lingering shadows of the Cold War, the secretive world of Area 51 sank deeper into the folds of obscurity and whispered dread. The age of satellites and global surveillance had begun, yet the heart of Groom Lake remained an enigma, even to those tasked with watching the world's every hidden corner. Within its guarded fences and buried vaults, a quiet transformation took hold. A shift not marked by grand projects or public triumphs, but by a growing silent entanglement with something beyond the known. The silent accord, forged in whispers and sealed in fear, evolved into a complex web of silent cooperation and darker experiments. By this time, those entrusted with overseeing the operations at Area 51 ceased to think of the artifacts in terms of mere alien technology. A quiet, unsettling consensus began to emerge among the deepest layers of command, a belief that the artifacts were, in some way, alive. Not alive in the biological sense, not conscious in a way any human mind could grasp, but aware, and perhaps waiting. To this end, a new directive surfaced, known only among a select few as Directive Mirror. Unlike previous programs focused on reverse engineering or cautious experimentation, Directive Mirror proposed a far bolder objective, not merely to observe or study, but to create. The logic was simple in its arrogance. If the artifacts responded to proximity, observation, and even human consciousness, then perhaps it was possible to replicate the conditions under which they were found, to build something akin to them. A human-made construct that could serve as a bridge, a mirror held up to the unknown, reflecting back whatever intelligence lay beyond the veil. The project began with a modest scale. A synthetic composite chamber, constructed of rare earth metals and advanced polymers, designed to mimic the structural anomalies observed in the recovered artifacts. The chamber itself was an architectural impossibility, its inner walls curved and interlaced in patterns derived from the fractal symbols previously encountered during Echo Prime. And then into this chamber they placed a device. It was not alien, at least not in its origin. It was a construct of human hands, a fusion of cutting-edge quantum processors, electromagnetic emitters, and experimental materials gleaned from years of covert research. The intent was simple and chilling, to see if the device could attract attention. For weeks, the chamber remained silent. Instruments recorded nothing. Observers rotated in shifts, their reports echoing the same refrain, no change. Until in the stillness of a desert night, the chamber activated itself. The event began with a low hum, soft and rhythmic, rising from the walls without the aid of any external power. The device within flickered, not with the steady pulse of engineered circuits, but with a shifting, organic light, a soft pulse that seemed to breathe. Observers recorded a sudden shift in the ambient temperature, a subtle lowering that spread not outward from the chamber, but inward, as if the space within was being drawn into itself. Then came the whisper. Those present described it differently. A low chant, a soft sigh, a murmur just beneath the threshold of hearing. But all agreed on one chilling fact. The sound carried meaning, though no words could be discerned. A knowing, a quiet recognition, and an invitation. In the days that followed, the device's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Without external input, it began to generate patterns, geometric sequences projected as soft light against the chamber walls. Some patterns shifted with the presence of observers, responding subtly to emotional states, heart rates, even unspoken thoughts. And then, without warning, the device shut down. Not powered off, not malfunctioned. Shut down, deliberately as though by choice. Attempts to restart it failed. When disassembled for examination, its internal components were found subtly altered. Wires rerouted themselves, circuits shifted in impossible ways. Materials synthesized in the lab now bore traces of unknown elements, atomic structures that should not have existed within this solar system. The conclusion among those involved in Directive Mirror was chilling in its simplicity. The device had been touched, altered by an intelligence that defied comprehension, an unseen hand reaching across the divide of understanding to reshape the reflection they had dared to create. The fallout within Area 51 was immediate. The device was sealed within layers of containment, monitored continuously under the highest levels of security. Yet even under lock and key, it continued to change, subtly, persistently, evolving beyond the sum of its parts. And worse, the presence lingered. Personnel who had worked on Directive Mirror reported strange phenomena, shadows that moved against the light, soft voices echoing in empty corridors, dreams shared between individuals who had never met outside the project. One security officer, assigned to the containment chamber, vanished during his shift. Surveillance footage revealed nothing but a single frame of static, within which a faint silhouette, tall, slender, and entirely featureless, could be seen standing within the chamber before the recording returned to normal. The officer was never found. In response, the highest levels of command ordered the project terminated. The device was sealed within a specialized vault beneath the deepest levels of the facility, entombed within a sphere of alloy designed to suppress all electromagnetic emissions. No further experiments were permitted. Directive Mirror was struck from all records. But among those who had touched the edge of the unknown, a quiet truth remained. The mirror had been held up. The reflection had been seen. And the intelligence beyond it had not turned away. The watchers within Area 51 knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that they had been noticed. As your heart slows and your breath softens in the gentle pull of this unfolding story, remember, some reflections once glimpsed cannot be unseen. Some mirrors do not reflect, but reveal. In the next chapter, we shall drift deeper still into the alliances forged in darkness, and the quiet manipulations that blurred the lines between observer and observed, as Area 51 stepped beyond secrecy into silent complicity with forces not entirely its own. The twilight of the 1980s brought with it a strange quiet, a lull upon the winds that swept across the Nevada sands, as though the desert itself held its breath. Yet beneath this surface calm, within the veiled heart of Area 51, a far more disquieting stillness took hold. The experiments had ceased, the vaults sealed, and the watchers behind layers of concrete and secrecy sat in uneasy silence. But the silence was not peace. For in that quiet, a subtle shift began to weave itself through the very fabric of the facility. It began with the personnel. Those who had served for years under the shadowed banner of Groom Lake, men and women hardened by decades of covert operations and impossible knowledge, began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Their reports grew vague, their eyes shadowed by a distant, unreadable calm. Conversations that once hummed with coded urgency became marked by long silences, thoughtful pauses, and occasional, almost dreamlike detachment. And then there were the disappearances. Not the loud vanishings of past years, nor the sudden, inexplicable losses of previous eras. These were softer, quieter. Men and women would complete their shifts, walk the same corridors they had 1,000 times before, and simply never arrive at their next post. No alarms, no anomalies on the cameras. Just an absence. As though the desert itself had drawn them into its silent heart. The security systems, once deemed impenetrable, recorded nothing unusual. And yet the names began to slip from active duty lists with an unsettling regularity. A pattern emerged, subtle and chilling in its simplicity. Every person who vanished had at some point been stationed near the sealed vault containing the artifact from Directive Mirror. Within the upper tiers of Area 51's command, a grim understanding settled like a slow, creeping frost. The artifact was not dormant. It was waiting. An emergency council convened in the most secure sub-levels of the facility, attended only by those with clearance levels so high their identities remain unknown even within classified records. The meeting, lasting no longer than 30 minutes, concluded with a directive that would alter the course of Area 51's hidden operations forever. They would not destroy the artifact. They would not contain it further. They would cooperate. This decision, born of fear and fatalism, marked the beginning of what insiders would later whisper as the Shadow Accord. Unlike the Silent Accord before it, which sought mere understanding, the Shadow Accord accepted an unspoken truth. The intelligence linked to the artifact did not desire simple observation. It sought interaction, influence, perhaps even integration. Under this new, silent directive, select individuals were chosen, not scientists or soldiers, but intermediaries. Men and women plucked from obscurity, trained in secret, conditioned beyond recognition, and tasked with a role darker than any previous operation. They would serve as vessels, conduits through which this unseen presence might whisper its will. They called them the Bridges. At first, the Bridges operated within controlled parameters, isolated, monitored, their interactions with the artifact carefully recorded and studied. They would sit within proximity of the sealed vault, subjected to long sessions of silent observation, waiting for something. And something came. The first recorded interaction occurred in the soft hush of an early morning shift. A female operative, known in fragmented files only as Evelyn, entered a trance-like state without external provocation. Her eyes opened, yet her gaze was fixed on something no one else could see. When she spoke, her voice was layered, not with echoes, but with something deeper, as though other voices moved beneath her words. The message she delivered was brief. We see you watching. We see ourselves within you. She awoke minutes later with no memory of the event. From that moment, the Bridges were no longer observers. They became participants in a silent exchange that defied human understanding. Sessions increased in frequency and duration, always carefully documented, though the documents themselves vanished almost as quickly as they were created. Strange patterns emerged. The Bridges often awoke with knowledge they could not have known. Advanced mathematical theories, foreign languages, technical designs for technologies decades beyond contemporary understanding. More unsettling still, they often spoke of concepts untouched by human philosophy. Awareness woven across dimensions, consciousness existing beyond linear time, beings whose existence was not confined to a single plane of reality. The command within Area 51 grew divided. Some viewed these developments as the ultimate opportunity, a chance to harness knowledge beyond human scope, to leap centuries ahead in technological and philosophical evolution. They envisioned a future where humanity stood as equals among the cosmic intelligence that had whispered into their ears. Others saw a darker possibility. What if this knowledge was not a gift, but a contagion? A subtle invasion not of ships or weapons, but of thought, of influence seeping quietly into the heart of human civilization through those most desperate to unlock its secrets. As debates raged in sealed chambers and whispered corridors, the Bridges continued their work. They traveled beyond Area 51, sometimes within other covert installations, sometimes into civilian sectors under layers of fabricated identities. They moved quietly among populations, unnoticed, their eyes reflecting the same distant calm that had marked the beginning of the changes within Groom Lake's staff. And wherever they walked, strange phenomena followed. Power outages, communications blackouts, clusters of identical dreams shared among unrelated individuals, sudden spikes in unexplained psychological phenomena within nearby populations, visions, voices, waking dreams, a quiet, creeping influence spreading outward from the heart of the desert. And still, the command at Area 51 remained silent. Because by now, they understood. The Bridges were not just conduits. They were the vanguard of something moving slowly, inexorably into the heart of human consciousness. Not through force, not through fear, but through invitation. As your heart quiets and your mind drifts deeper into the soft rhythm of this unfolding tale, Know this, some invasions arrive not with the thunder of war, but with the hush of a whisper in the dark. And some doors, once opened by curious hands, never truly close. In the next chapter, we shall wander further into the unseen spread of this silent influence, and the quiet surrender of those who believed they could control what was never theirs to command. The dawn of the 1990s arrived upon a world shimmering with the promise of new beginnings. The Cold War cracked and crumbled, borders shifted, and the hum of globalization began to weave distant nations into a tapestry of shared dreams. But in the heart of Nevada's silent desert, none of these changes touched the veiled operations of Area 51. There, beneath the scorched earth and silent ridges, the unseen threads of a far older and darker alliance continued to tighten. By now, the existence of the bridges was no longer a secret within the shadowed corridors of the facility. Though their names were never recorded and their faces rarely remembered, their presence was undeniable. A quiet caste of intermediaries who moved with a calm detached from all human instinct. They were not prisoners, nor entirely free. They were participants in a pact deeper than blood, silent agents of a presence that seemed content, for now, to whisper rather than command. But outside the fences of Groom Lake, the world began to murmur of strange things. In remote corners of the American Southwest, reports surfaced of individuals speaking in unknown tongues during episodes of sleepwalking. Entire communities described shared visions, dreams of cities under endless stars, towers of shimmering light, and watchers who moved without sound across landscapes untouched by human hands. Though dismissed publicly as folklore or psychological mass phenomena, the truth whispered beneath the classified layers told a darker tale. Area 51's covert monitoring teams, operating beneath a program cryptically titled Project Lattice, began tracking the spread of these occurrences. Patterns emerged across rural regions, particularly those within certain proximity to the testing ranges and secret flight corridors extending outward from the base. The anomalies followed no logic of migration or media influence. They moved like ripples upon a still pond, extending in silent waves from unseen points of origin. At first, the affected individuals returned to their lives with little more than fragmented memories of strange dreams. But as the years edged forward, the effects grew more profound. Some began to exhibit abilities that defied explanation. Heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, uncanny intuition bordering on precognition, artistic abilities that transcended known techniques as if guided by an unseen hand, and others changed. The files remained sealed beneath levels of security even the most classified agents could not penetrate. But fragments of these records, whispered among the darkest corners of intelligence circles, spoke of transformations that crossed the threshold of human understanding. Cases of individuals whose physical appearances subtly shifted, eyes reflecting faint, inhuman iridescence, skin taking on unnatural hues under certain lights. Behavioral changes marked by detached empathy, an almost mechanical calm, and, in some instances, the quiet repetition of symbols traced upon walls, paper, or even their own skin. The command within Area 51 did not panic. They observed, they recorded, they measured the pulse of this slow, creeping influence as one might monitor the approach of a distant storm. And then, quietly, they escalated. A new directive emerged under the codename Project Resonance. The goal was disturbingly simple: to harness the phenomenon. If this presence could extend its influence through dreams, thoughts, and subtle physical changes, then perhaps it could be controlled. Perhaps humanity could not merely observe, nor even negotiate, but command the influence and turn it into an asset. Controlled experiments began within isolated environments. Subjects were carefully selected, often individuals already displaying signs of the anomaly's touch. They were housed within black sites across the western states, subjected to sensory deprivation, controlled exposure to fractal symbols derived from the artifacts, and audio patterns mimicking the hums recorded during previous incidents. The results were erratic. Some subjects displayed heightened cognitive abilities for brief periods before collapsing into catatonic states. Others exhibited bursts of violent behavior, often directed not outward but toward themselves. A few, the rarest of all, entered deep trances, whispering long sequences of unknown language, their bodies rigid, their eyes open and unblinking for hours on end. What terrified the researchers most was not the unpredictability of these results, but their consistency in one unsettling aspect. Every subject, without exception, spoke of an entity or presence beyond the veil of perception. They described it not as a god, nor as a creature, but as an awareness. A vast, silent intelligence watching from a distance closer than thought. One subject, a young woman marked only as Case 34, delivered a final message before her disappearance. Words that would become a haunting refrain within the sealed halls of Area 51. It's not outside, it's inside. It always was. She vanished from a secured room monitored by 15 separate surveillance systems. The recordings captured nothing but static and the faint hum of a pulse that did not align with any known frequency. After that, Project Resonance was quietly terminated. Officially, the files were closed, sealed under levels of classification so dense they were known to only a handful of individuals across the globe. But unofficially, the influence continued. The bridges remained active, moving among civilian populations under identities crafted with surgical precision. Intelligence networks began to integrate their silent observations into broader geopolitical strategies. Decisions at the highest levels of global policy were influenced, subtly, by data points linked to the spread of this unseen force. It was no longer about control, it became about adaptation. Within the shadowed heart of Area 51, the realization took root like a quiet, growing infection. Humanity was not in command of this presence. It was instead being shaped by it. Slowly, subtly, and without resistance. As your breath slows and the hush of this unfolding tale settles around you like the soft sands of a timeless desert, ponder this. Not all invasions arrive in force. Some come with a whisper, an idea, a silent adjustment of thought and dream, until at last they are no longer the stranger at the door, but the familiar within the mirror. In the next chapter, we shall drift deeper into the realm where influence turned to quiet occupation, and where the men and women of Area 51 learned too late that some alliances are never truly mutual. Beneath the dry hush of desert air, the facility settled deeper into the hush of evening. Lights glowed dimly along the chain-link fences topped with coils of razor wire, and watchtowers stood like silent sentinels against a waning crimson sky. In this hour, between the day's fierce clarity and night's shadowed secrets, the hush of Area 51 felt almost sacred. It was a lull in which truths waited and rumors breathed. Captain Evelyn Graves stepped from the armored transport with deliberate calm. She had joined the base's intelligence team only months earlier, and yet the weight of what she had begun to learn already surpassed anything she had ever experienced. On her breath, she carried the scent of boiling sage, used in a ritual the night before, in hopes to steady nerves before unveiling a discovery so monumental, so untethered from convention that it defied everything she had learned in books and briefings. She gazed across the hangar's wide expanse, where aircraft she could scarcely name rested under low-slung canopies. Among them, panels gleamed with cobalt blue bioluminescent lines, an effect no earthly design should ever produce. In the hushed glow, she saw technicians, clad in nondescript dark jackets, moving with reverence. They were guardians of something that belonged to another world. Inside, she found Dr. Malik Hassan, leaning over a table where a circular object lay, perhaps the size of a small hatch or the center of a door. Its surface was polished to specular sheen, but lines of writing, arcane and flowing without resemblance to any known script, rippled beneath the surface like water. Dr. Hassan lifted it with gloved precision, rotating it slowly. The glyphs shimmered in response, as though sensing their observer. "It hums in the dark," he murmured, voice low, a resonance with the mind, not just sensors. Evelyn nodded, recalling the strange dreams that had visited her after the artifact's arrival. Echoes of corridors carved in crystal, voices, neither male nor female, whispered in loops she could not understand, building into melodies half-remembered on waking. In the days before, the artifact had been recovered from a site high in Nevada's remote mountains, a crash site where torn metal lay scattered among stone spires. The retrieval team had described a hull that refused to burn in flames, fuselage that glowed with pulsing light beneath its fractured shell. Evelyn had first awoken to the news in the dead hours. She'd known then that her life would change. Now, under the fluorescent lamps, she watched Hassan begin to hum. An instinctive response, perhaps. The resonance came again, a low vibration humming through bones, pushing barriers. She closed her eyes as the temple of her mind opened. In memory's silence, she glimpsed geometry beyond Euclid's definitions, curves inside loops, dimensions disappearing into themselves, then voices once more. They wove her name and spoke of silent gateways, of crossing thresholds where time becomes water. She inhaled sharply, calling herself back. When she opened her eyes, the table stood empty. The artifact had vanished. The alarm started a moment later, across the base. Sirens whining, guards shouting, doors slamming shut. Under the glow of emergency lights, Evelyn sprinted down corridors she knew by memory. She thought of the protocols: lockdown, secure perimeter, notify on-site leadership. But there was no code, no pattern, unless the object itself had initiated something. She burst into the control hub, where screens blinked alerts, sensors offline, feeds scrambled, an intrusion detected where none should be possible. The lines of the fence showed an anomalous blur, a figure or many figures passing through in silence, like ghosts, like her dream. "Status," she barked. Dr. Hassan appeared, drawn by the urgency. We've lost containment. I don't know how." The hum built inside her ears, pulsing in time with flashing red lights. She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to center herself. The other scientists in the room stared at screens, voices hushed. There was no evacuation order. They were inside the innermost sanctum. They could not leave, not without risking the other secrets held here, not without releasing what they were protecting. Chief Security Officer Reyes stepped in, radio clipped to his chest. "Fence breach, Sector 7, Northwest Quadrant. Surveillance lost. Initiate lockdown code red." Evelyn processed the words. Lockdown. No breach should be possible. The boundary had sensors, motion detection, heat imaging. Yet whatever had come for the artifact had found a way in and out, slipping from every watchful eye. She looked at Hassan. The object, could it be calling something? Sending a signal? He closed his eyes. "I don't think it's me. I think it's the thing itself." They exchanged a glance heavy with dread. The artifact, alive perhaps, using its own will to draw attention. But attention to what end? Sirens echoed as armoured units took positions at critical choke points. The base went into highest alert. Outside, night fell fully, and the desert's vast emptiness seemed pregnant, waiting for movement. Inside her mind, Evelyn felt the hum again. It sounded like laughter. No, a melody of layered laughter, a polyphony that left her hollow-toned. She gripped the edge of the console. "It wants us to see," she whispered, though she did not know if her voice was real or in her head. "See what?" Hassan asked, voice tight. "I don't know," she said, "but I think we're being invited." Reyes stepped forward. "Captain Graves, orders?" She steadied herself. She had rank here, responsibility, but her heart thumped with the knowledge that commands might not matter. She pressed her palm to a red override key. "Initiate controlled exposure. Bring the comet sensor arrays online. I want every frequency tracked. Beam, electromagnetic, sonic, everything." Hassan looked at her, awe and fear mingling. "You want full spectrum listening?" She nodded. "And isolate the source of the resonance. We trap it. We contain it again." He tapped commands into the computer. The screens flickered and a mesh of waveforms appeared. The hum, the laughter registered as a pattern, peaks and valleys, echoes of a language she could not decode. But for the first time, it was visible. In that moment, the thing, or whoever was behind its disappearance, was broadcasting. And they were listening. Through the night, cavalry of engineers and scientists, delving into signals, extracting data, sending drone pulses into the desert beyond the fence, trying to trace a direction. Evelyn stood at the center, the artifact gone but still present in every vibration of the base. She shivered despite herself. Davies, one of the signal analysts, approached. He looked drained. "Captain, we're getting coordinates, but they shift. It's not fixed. It's fluid." "Fluid," Evelyn repeated. She thought of her dream corridors, turns that expanded into windows that opened onto other times, other spaces. Was the signal a map or an invitation to walk through? "Should we go after it?" Davies asked quietly. Her jaw clenched. Protocol forbade pursuit beyond boundaries without clear orders. But this was no protocol. This was contact. She looked at Hassan. He nodded back. Calm assent. "Bring me my jeep. We're tracing it ourselves." And so they went into the desert night, following the resonance beyond fences, where sensors splintered their readings. The sound glowed in their ears as they crested dunes, rover lights bobbing ahead, showing nothing but rock and whispering wind. They reached the spot at dawn, exhausted, signal jagged. The humming had dropped to a whisper now. In the orange pre-sunrise light, they found scorch marks on the earth, a shallow bowl where no star should fall. And at the centre, a single footprint. Indentations deep in the dust, flanked by nothing. No body, no exit trace, but a footprint unlike any human's, elongated, narrow, toes that curled forward like petals. Evelyn knelt, swept dust from the print. The pattern of the desert wind had smoothed it, but not erased it. Not human, Hassan murmured. She traced the print's outline. Or, Evelyn said softly, not entirely. In that still morning air with sun cresting the peaks, they understood. The artifact's removal had summoned something. Something that may still walk unseen here. And what Americans had hidden at Area 51 was no longer buried. It was waking. Beyond the fence, the desert rippled in silence. The footprints led nowhere, but they were a message, an unspoken promise that the world beneath the hum awaited. And Evelyn, her heart pounding, realized that the secrets she'd been trained to guard were beginning to guard themselves. As the first bird called across the mesa, she stood and met Hassan's eyes. "We proceed," she said, "but carefully." He nodded, face pale with wonder. "Carefully," she repeated, and the desert listened. The sun reached its quiet zenith as Evelyn and Dr. Hassan returned to the base, their convoy of silent vehicles gliding over the cracked earth like spectres. The desert heat had begun to rise, casting quivering mirages upon the horizon. Yet neither spoke of the sun, nor the sky, nor the humming that still seemed to haunt the edges of their senses. They rode in a hush, weighted with the realization that something ancient, or perhaps something entirely new, had stirred in response to their touch. Inside Area 51's command center, the atmosphere hung thick with questions no protocol could answer. The artifact's disappearance, the spectral footprint, the signal's elusive shifting, all remained unsolved. Evelyn stood before a vast tactical screen, its luminous grid scrolling with data points that flickered in and out of coherence. The readings were inconsistent, as though the fabric of the information itself resisted capture. Major Hollis, the station's operations commander, approached with a clipboard pressed to his chest. His grey uniform bore the polished insignia of 30 years' service, though his eyes showed cracks of doubt Evelyn had never seen before. "We've swept the perimeter thrice. No breaches, no evidence of tampering," he reported quietly. Evelyn studied the man, weighing his words against the silent knowledge humming at the edge of her consciousness. "Then something bypassed our eyes," she answered, voice even, "or perhaps it never came in, not by our means." Hollis shifted uncomfortably. "You're suggesting it walked through our walls? That it folded into this place?" Dr. Hassan, standing beside them, rubbed his temple, his voice slow and somber. "I'm suggesting our understanding of borders, physical or otherwise, might be entirely irrelevant here." The room fell into a tense quiet. Screens displayed looping images of the footprint, captured by high-resolution drones. Each sweep of analysis returned inconclusive results. No matching biological markers, no known alloy traces in the indentation. Yet the pressure, measured by the soil's compression, indicated a weight similar to an average human. A being both known and unknown. Evelyn exhaled softly, her mind running in circuits, following the echoes of a memory that was not entirely her own. The hum, the resonance, had softened, but remained like a faint chord plucked softly across the strings of her mind. "We're chasing shadows," Hollis murmured. "We've got to ground this in protocol." Evelyn looked at him, a slow determination in her eyes. "And what if protocol is precisely what it wants us to rely on? What if it knows our rules better than we do?" At that, the doors opened with a gentle hiss, and Chief Reyes entered, his dark eyes sharp beneath the brim of his cap. "Captain, we've detected a pattern shift in the northern quadrant. Surveillance drones are picking up distortions, not movement, just distortions." He placed a tablet on the console. Evelyn leaned forward. The screen displayed a field of static, yet within it, faint outlines shimmered like heat ripples. Shapes too uniform to be wind, too irregular to be shadows. They floated in and out, undulating softly, neither approaching nor retreating. Hollis frowned. "Natural interference?" "No," Reyes answered flatly. We ran all spectrums. This isn't interference, it's deliberate. Evelyn watched the silent ballet of invisible entities caught by the machine's indifferent gaze. She felt again the whispering invitation that had haunted her dreams, the sense of being observed by an intelligence that did not wish harm, but curiosity. "They're watching," she said softly. Dr. Hassan nodded, and waiting. It was then that the humming in her mind surged, not louder but sharper, like a key turning gently in a long, unused lock. Evelyn closed her eyes. The dream corridors unfolded again, winding crystal halls bathed in soft lavender light. The voices returned, melodic whispers that wound around her thoughts. "We stand where you do not look. We wait where you dare not stand. Come where the veil is thinnest." She opened her eyes slowly. Around her, the command center pulsed with quiet urgency, yet the voices faded as naturally as breath itself. "I think they're asking us to follow," she murmured. The words felt absurd even as they left her lips. Yet as Hassan and Reyes exchanged silent glances, neither refuted her. Hollis opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, then closed it again. Reyes spoke quietly. "The distortions are centered on the old hangar, the one we sealed off after the incident in '89. Hassan inhaled sharply. "The containment chamber?" Evelyn nodded once. That chamber, locked for decades after a failed experiment involving gravitational fields, had remained a silent relic of mistakes not meant for public ears, a place where rumor met reality. She turned to Reyes. "Prepare a team. Small. No weapons. Observation only." Hollis bristled. "We're sending people into a breach site unarmed?" Evelyn met his gaze calmly. "We're sending people to listen, not to fight." Hollis hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Perhaps he too felt the weight of inevitability that hung in the air. By nightfall, a hand-picked team of 5 stood at the threshold of the old hangar. Evelyn led them, her heart steady beneath layers of Kevlar and a calm she barely understood. Dr. Hassan walked beside her, carrying a compact scanner array tuned to the frequencies they believed corresponded with the artifact's resonance. They entered under a sky quilted with silent stars, the desert wind falling to an eerie hush. Inside, the hangar greeted them with a breathless stillness. The air felt dense, as though holding its own against the outside world. The walls bore scars of long-forgotten experiments, cracks sealed by time, surfaces stained by the memory of failed containment. Yet now, at its center, a soft glow pulsed upon the floor, faint and rhythmic like a heartbeat. The light formed a slow-turning sigil, geometric lines impossible to trace with the eye, shifting softly even as they watched. Evelyn felt the hum return, synchronized with the pulse of the sigil. They approached slowly. No alarms, no resistance. The space accepted them, an eerie welcome that felt neither friendly nor hostile. Hassan whispered, "It's a gate." Evelyn knelt beside the sigil, watching it rotate within itself. Or a message. As they stood there, breath held, the sigil changed, splintering softly into countless lines, then weaving together into a symbol they all recognized. A footprint. Identical to the one found in the desert, rendered in pure light, hovering inches above the concrete floor. No words followed. No grand revelation unfolded. Yet in that moment, understanding brushed the edges of Evelyn's mind like a soft hand in the dark. They had not found the artifact. The artifact had found them. And this was only the beginning of a conversation humanity had long feared to have. In the heavy hush of the old hangar, the footprint of light hovered. A silent beacon suspended in the air's breathless embrace. The faint glow pulsed softly, casting slow, shifting shadows across the cracked concrete floor. The 5 figures standing before it watched in solemn silence, their breaths shallow, hearts steady in a shared moment that transcended command protocols and scientific reasoning. Evelyn stood closest, the resonance humming faintly against her skin like a living current. She felt the floor beneath her boots, solid and sure, yet the air around her seemed almost liquefied, softened by an unseen presence that whispered not in sound but in sensation. Every fibre of her being told her that this was no threat, and yet it was no comfort either. Dr. Hassan shifted beside her, his scanner array humming gently as it struggled to translate the pulsations. The data streamed across its surface in delicate waves, charts bending and flexing with a fluidity that defied standard analysis. "It's responding to proximity," he whispered, eyes fixed on the luminous imprint. "The frequency alters when we move, when we watch." Evelyn's voice remained low, threading into the quiet. It knows we're here. She reached out, slow as the settling of night, her gloved hand trembling only slightly. The air grew warmer the closer she came, tinged with a faint static that brushed her fingertips like unseen silk. At the edge of her reach, the footprint pulsed brighter, not flaring, not recoiling, simply acknowledging. Her hand hovered there, suspended in the fragile space between the known and the unimaginable. Then, softly, impossibly, the footprint began to shift. It did not fade nor vanish, but unfolded. Lines bent, curves elongated, and the imprint of an alien foot blossomed outward into something far more complex, a map of interlocking symbols, swirling corridors of light, folding upon themselves in geometries the human eye could scarcely follow. Glyphs spun into existence, some sharp like the edges of stars, others soft and rounded as whispered breaths. They floated together in a slow waltz of meaning neither Evelyn nor her team could grasp in full. But somewhere in her core, a truth stirred. Hassan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he held. It's language, Evelyn nodded slowly, or the closest it can make to one. Reyes, standing guard at the hangar entrance, spoke low into his comm, keeping the channel open without issuing orders. His eyes never left the spectacle unfolding before them. The other two specialists, Lang and DeWitt, kept their distance, instruments raised, data streaming silently into encrypted feeds no one yet dared analyze aloud. And then, the floor beneath the symbols rippled. Not a quake, not a tremor, but a ripple, like a stone skipped across still water. The air around the sigil shimmered, thickening visibly into folds of soft luminescence. The lines of the hangar blurred, and for a heartbeat, Evelyn saw beyond. She saw corridors vast and crystalline, stretching into horizons of violet mist. Doorways carved with flowing script, neither random nor rigid, alive with slow-moving pulses of inner light. Figures moved beyond those corridors, tall, slender, shapes that flowed rather than walked, silhouettes blurred at the edges as though cloaked in a shifting veil of colour and sound. They moved with a grace born of patience, with eyes, if they were eyes, that seemed turned both inward and outward at once. They did not speak. They did not gesture. Yet Evelyn felt them notice her. A glance that was not a glance. An acknowledgement that reached through the veil and brushed the edge of her soul. Then the vision folded back, retreating like a gentle tide, and the hangar settled into its quiet once more. The glowing symbols remained, now pulsing softly in a rhythm that felt almost expectant. Hassan swallowed hard. It's a doorway. Evelyn turned her gaze to him. Not open, but shown. DeWitt spoke up, his voice soft but firm. Why show it to us? Why now? Rise answered before Evelyn could. What, because we took something that wasn't meant to be touched. The words settled heavily into the silence. Evelyn's mind turned to the artifact, now gone, vanished without trace, its resonance still lingering. Had it been a beacon, a key, or perhaps a messenger? She felt the weight of possibilities coiling like a slow current around her, and in the hush that followed, a single thought rose, quiet and undeniable. They are waiting. Waiting for what? She did not know. She took a slow breath, steadying the cascade of thoughts racing through her mind. Then, with deliberate calm, she stepped closer to the luminous display. The symbols shifted gently as if adjusting their rhythm to her presence. They responded, not with words, not with gesture, but with the simple act of acknowledgement. Evelyn whispered, barely audible, "We see you." The hum deepened. A ripple of warmth passed through the air, and for a fleeting instant, a single glyph separated from the swirling mass, drifting closer, glowing faintly in hues of soft amber and quiet blue. Hassan reached instinctively for his scanner, capturing every nuance of its motion. But as the glyph neared Evelyn's outstretched hand, it did not threaten. It hovered, waiting, a choice. Evelyn's fingers hovered mere inches away. The team held their breath, the silence profound. With a quiet steadiness, she lowered her hand into the soft glow. The world did not explode. There was no shock, no blinding revelation, only warmth. A soft, encompassing warmth that seeped into her skin, her bones, her very thoughts. Not intrusive, not alien, but familiar. And in that moment, Evelyn understood a fragment of something vast beyond measure. The glyph folded softly into her palm, dissolving into a gentle shimmer that danced along her skin before fading. She turned slowly to her team. Her voice came low, sure and calm. They're not here to conquer. Hassan met her gaze. Then what are they here for? Evelyn let the answer settle in her chest before speaking. They want to be seen, and they want us to listen. The hangar fell silent again, but this time it was a silence alive with possibilities, a hush before the dawn of a truth long kept in the dark, and beneath it all the desert night beyond the walls whispered softly, as though leaning in, waiting to hear what humankind would say in return. The desert dawn cast long, muted shadows across the compound as Evelyn Graves stood at the edge of the old hangar's threshold. The air bore a softness unusual for the barren Nevada plains, a strange, expectant calm that hovered like the last breath before a song begins. In her palm, where the glyph had dissolved, the warmth lingered faintly, a whisper against her skin. It was not a mark, not an imprint, yet it remained more tangible than any scar. Behind her, the team broke into hushed conversation. Data streams flickered across their devices, lines of symbols scrolling in patterns that defied language, yet pulsed with a rhythm oddly familiar, as if some silent music threaded through the fabric of the air itself. Reyes approached first, his eyes steady beneath the shadow of his cap. "Captain, the command center's requesting a report. They picked up energy readings from here, spikes off every known scale." Evelyn turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the sun's first golden strands kissed the desert's edge. "Tell them, we made contact. That's all they need for now." Reyes nodded, offering no argument. The man, hardwired for protocol, seemed to understand instinctively that this was not a matter for conventional reports. Some truths refused to be typed into briefings or reduced to lines of sterile text. Dr. Hassan joined them, a quiet awe in his voice. "We've begun decoding fragments of the symbols. Patterns are emerging, mathematical sequences, harmonic intervals. It's like they're using the structure of music and geometry as a bridge." Evelyn allowed herself a slow breath. "A language built on universal constants," he nodded. "And more than that, it adapts. It reacts when we observe it. I think it's alive in some way." The weight of his words settled between them. Alive. Not the message, not the technology. The language itself. Evelyn turned back toward the hangar's interior, where the luminous glyphs still drifted in slow, deliberate spirals. The air shimmered faintly around them, as though the fabric of space itself had softened to allow their presence. It was Reyes who voiced what lingered in every mind. "So, what now?" The question hung there, caught between the old world of secrecy and the new dawn of revelation. Evelyn met his eyes, calm and certain. "Now, we listen." The following hours unfolded like a slow exhalation. Inside the command center, a small, trusted circle gathered. Major Hollis, despite his earlier resistance, took his place quietly beside Reyes and Hassan. Around them, banks of monitors glowed with subdued light, displaying streams of symbols that shifted gently, weaving between recognizable sequences and those beyond human comprehension. Evelyn addressed them in a tone as soft as the dawn outside. "We've kept secrets here longer than most of us have been alive. Some we've protected for good reasons, others out of fear." She let her gaze move over each face, pausing briefly on Hollis, whose stern expression flickered with something akin to reluctant understanding. "What we saw today isn't an enemy," she continued, "nor is it an accident. It's an invitation. And if we meet it with weapons, with suspicion, we'll never know what was offered." Silence answered her, but it was not resistance. It was a hush of consideration. Hassan spoke next, his voice low but filled with quiet certainty. "The language is responding to sound waves, specific frequencies, layered harmonics. We've set up a containment array in the lower chamber. If we use a controlled audio signal, it might open another response." Reyes frowned slightly. "Controlled? You mean talk back?" Hassan offered a small, calm nod. "Yes, we answer." Hollis exhaled sharply but didn't object. Instead, he studied Evelyn for a long moment. "And who decides what we say?" Evelyn held his gaze. "We all do." By nightfall, the chamber beneath the old hangar was prepared. A soft, ambient hum filled the air, carefully calibrated to resonate at frequencies discovered in the artifact's initial pulse. The space glowed with a subtle violet sheen, not from any human-made light, but from the residual presence of the glyphs that had traced their paths in the upper hall. Evelyn stood at the center, facing the suspended emitter that pulsed with the harmonic sequence Hassan had refined. Around her, the trusted few formed a quiet circle. No weapons, no shields, only instruments and open hands. The first tones emerged gently, soft waves of layered sound that shimmered against the skin rather than the ears. They echoed into the chamber, folding upon themselves in a chorus of soft, wordless music. For a heartbeat, there was only silence in return. Then the walls began to breathe. It was not a trick of sound or light. The very air seemed to move in response, a slow, gentle undulation, as if the fabric of the room resonated with a presence unseen but deeply felt. Lines of soft light traced the walls, spiraling gently toward the center where Evelyn stood. The hum deepened, vibrating gently in her chest, and the language returned, symbols unfolding in delicate streams before her, each moving in quiet, graceful arcs. And within the cascade of symbols, a single word, or perhaps an idea. She saw it not with her eyes, but in the quiet place where dreams dwell. A concept that filled her with a warmth so profound, it felt like the soft embrace of a long-lost friend. Understand. The meaning settled into her heart with a profound calm. They were not asking for allegiance, not demanding surrender, not even seeking worship. They were asking only to be understood. The chamber fell still, the harmonics fading gently into a hush. Evelyn turned to her companions, her voice soft but unwavering. They don't want submission, they want connection. Reyes nodded slowly. So, we begin with listening. Hollis, after a long, quiet pause, gave a single solemn nod. And we end with understanding. Evelyn let the quiet settle around them. In that silent chamber, surrounded by symbols of a language that defied fear, they stood together on the threshold of a conversation centuries in the waiting. And in the hush that followed, the stars above the desert burned quietly, bearing witness to the dawn of something neither entirely human nor entirely alien, but profoundly shared. In the softened hush of the subterranean chamber, Evelyn stood with her hand resting lightly on the harmonics emitter, her eyes following the slow dance of symbols that hovered like soft breath in the air before her. The room was dim, yet aglow with a luminescence that needed no source, a light that seemed to emanate from thought itself, flickering softly as if in response to the quiet rhythm of her heart. Around her, the trusted circle stood in silent vigil. Reyes watched with arms crossed loosely, his stern features softened by the faint golden glow. Dr. Hassan adjusted the interface of the sound array, his careful movements more akin to a musician than a scientist. Hollis, ever the soldier, remained by the doorway, eyes sharp but no longer skeptical. A guardian not of secrets, but of something far more fragile, trust. The harmonics faded into a stillness that felt deeper than silence. And yet, the presence remained. Evelyn exhaled slowly, letting the breath settle into the stillness. She felt the hum, not in her ears but within, a gentle resonance that touched no nerve endings and yet stirred every fibre of her being. It felt ancient and new, vast and intimate all at once. Then, as softly as a ripple in still water, the symbols began to change. One by one, they folded inward, converging into a single, shifting form. Shapes collapsed into lines, lines into curves, and the curves swirled into a form unmistakably clear. A circle, perfect and endless, floating just beyond the reach of her hand. It pulsed once, soft, slow. Then again, a rhythm. Hassan leaned forward, voice a hushed murmur. Heartbeat frequency, almost identical to human resting pulse. Evelyn watched, her own heart falling into sync with the gentle pulse. The circle remained, a quiet presence in the air. Evelyn spoke softly. "What is this?" The answer came, not in sound nor in language, but in sensation. A flood of warmth, like the sun rising over the desert after a cold night. A deep comfort that wrapped gently around her thoughts. Connection. The meaning drifted into her, not imposed, but offered like an open hand. They seek connection. Hassan's eyes flickered to his data feed. The patterns, they're changing again, responding to our heart rates. It's synchronizing. Evelyn nodded, speaking not to him, but to the presence that hovered gently in the air. We're listening. The pulse quickened, matching her voice. In that moment, Evelyn felt an understanding as profound as it was wordless. This was not a transmission, not a broadcast. It was an echo, a mirror held gently to them, reflecting not words but intention. A call answered in the only way that truly mattered, through openness. She reached out again, her fingertips hovering just shy of the circle. The air between pulsed faintly, tingling softly against her skin. Then, with a calmness that surprised even her, she pressed her palm forward, touching the space where the circle hung. The room held its breath, and the circle opened. It did not vanish, it did not shatter. It unfolded, blossoming softly outward like a slow dawn, revealing within its heart a vision so gentle, so fragile, Evelyn feared to blink and lose it. A landscape not seen but felt. Hills of soft crystal under skies the colour of twilight seas, rivers that sang as they moved, flowing with a luminescent current that wound through a forest of tall, slender spires. And beneath a sky adorned with twin suns, figures moved with grace and quiet purpose, neither man nor beast but something between, cloaked in shimmering veils of light and shadow. They did not speak, they did not threaten, they simply existed. And in their presence, Evelyn felt no fear, only a quiet yearning, a hope as soft and ancient as the turning of the stars. She withdrew her hand slowly, the vision fading with the motion. The circle pulsed once more, a gentle goodbye, before dissolving into the air like the last notes of a lullaby. The room exhaled with her. Hassan let out a slow breath. "We're not just studying them, they're studying us." Evelyn nodded, her voice soft as falling ash, "and they've been waiting a long time." Reyes stepped forward, his usual sternness softened by something that could almost be wonder. For what? For this moment. Evelyn met his gaze, a quiet certainty settling in her chest. For us to stop fearing them. Hollis crossed his arms, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "So, this is peace?" Evelyn gave a slow, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "No, this is a beginning. Peace is what we make after understanding." The chamber fell quiet once more. Above them, the desert night held its hush, a vast living silence that stretched from the soft dunes to the furthest stars. The wind stirred gently outside, carrying with it the whisper of ancient things long hidden, waiting patiently for the moment mankind would choose to listen rather than conquer. Hassan lowered his scanner, his voice carrying the weight of quiet realization. They could have crushed us, erased us, if they wanted. Evelyn glanced back toward the space where the circle had hovered, but they didn't. Reyes folded his arms, a soft smirk touching the edge of his mouth. "Maybe they're waiting to see if we deserve whatever it is they're offering." Evelyn gave a soft, slow nod. Maybe. But deep within her, she felt it, that soft, unwavering hum that sang of connection, not conquest. And for the first time since stepping onto the grounds of Area 51, Evelyn Graves felt no fear of the shadows. Only the quiet, fragile hope that in the deep hush between stars, humankind had finally begun to whisper back. Not with shouts, not with weapons, but with a gentle, steady heart. The desert listened, and somewhere beyond its silent dunes, something listened back. Night lingered quietly over the sprawling base, casting long silhouettes of the hangars and towers onto the silent desert floor. Within the subterranean chamber, Evelyn Graves sat upon a low steel bench, her hands folded in her lap, gaze fixed on the faint afterglow that lingered in the air where the circle had unfolded hours before. Around her the walls hummed softly, not with sound but with presence. She was alone now. The others had withdrawn, respecting an unspoken need for silence after the encounter. Hassan had retreated to his lab, poring over the shifting symbols with a fervour bordering on reverence. Reyes stood watch at the corridor's entrance, silent sentinel to whatever unknown lay ahead. Hollis, ever the man of guarded duty, had said little, his quiet departure marked only by a respectful nod. Evelyn remained. The air around her felt charged yet calm, like the pause between one heartbeat and the next. She let her mind drift, eyes softening as her breathing slowed. In that stillness, a memory rose from the quiet depths of her thoughts, a childhood evening beneath a sky of endless stars. She had been 7, standing beside her father in a field outside Carson City, staring up at a meteor shower painting streaks of silent fire across the heavens. She remembered the feeling even now, that quiet, aching sense of smallness and wonder. "We are so little," her father had whispered then, "and yet they see us." At the time she had thought he meant the stars. Now she wondered if even then he had sensed something more. A soft vibration stirred the air, no louder than a breath. Evelyn's eyes flickered open. Before her, in the centre of the chamber, a shape began to form, not with the grandiosity of the earlier symbols, but with a gentle subtlety, a shimmer like soft moonlight caught in still water. A figure. Its outlines slender, tall, more suggestion than form. It stood motionless, a silhouette composed of shifting light, its edges blurred as if woven from strands of silver mist. There were no discernible features, no eyes, no face, Yet Evelyn felt its gaze settle softly upon her, a presence without weight or intrusion. She did not rise, did not speak. Instead, she allowed herself to breathe and to listen. The figure remained silent, unmoving. The chamber's soft hum deepened faintly, and Evelyn felt it again. That warmth, that gentle pressure within her chest, a resonance that felt less like a voice and more like an emotion placed softly into her hands. "We are here." The words came not in sound, nor in language, but as pure understanding. They settled into her heart like a soft fall of snow. Evelyn bowed her head slightly, the smallest gesture of acknowledgement. "I know," she whispered. The figure shimmered, its outline pulsing gently with a rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. "You opened the gate." The realization touched her gently, a truth, not an accusation. "We listened," she answered softly. The presence shifted, not stepping, but flowing slightly closer, a ripple in the quiet air. "And now, you see." Evelyn met the unseen gaze, her voice low. "I don't know what I see, but I want to understand." A soft hum passed through the chamber, a soundless resonance that felt almost like approval. "You are ready." The words, or the thought, lingered in the air between them. Evelyn inhaled slow and steady. Ready for what? The figure's form flickered, its shape softening like mist stirred by a gentle breeze. To listen beyond. 1,000 questions swelled within her, about the artifact, the symbols, the visions, about the purpose of this presence, its origin, its intent. But Evelyn spoke only the one question that felt truest of all. "Why us?" The figure pulsed faintly. "Because you stopped reaching with fear." The words echoed in the silent chamber, soft as twilight rain. Evelyn felt her throat tighten, not with fear nor sorrow, but with something far deeper. A quiet knowing that the space between worlds was not crossed by force nor by conquest, but by a single, simple act. Acceptance. The figure's glow softened once more, its edges dimming gently. When you stop fearing the unknown, you become known. And with that it faded, dissolving softly into the stillness, leaving behind a warmth that lingered gently upon the air. Evelyn sat in the hush that followed, her hands still, her heart steady. She did not call for the others, did not rise. She simply sat, allowing the quiet to settle fully within her. Outside, the desert wind stirred softly across the dunes, carrying with it the scent of sage and the whisper of dawn upon the far horizon. Somewhere beneath a sky older than memory, a conversation had begun. Not with words, nor with treaties, but with the quiet, unshakable courage to listen. And in that hush, Evelyn Graves understood the simplest truth of all. The greatest secret hidden in the shadows of Area 51 was never about fear. It was about waiting. Waiting for humanity to finally whisper back. And now, the silence had been broken. Morning unfolded with a muted grace over the desert, its first pale beams casting long, slender shadows across the silent compound. The walls of Area 51 stood still beneath the growing light, their concrete bones absorbing the hush of a dawn that felt older than the earth itself. The base stirred with routine, guards making their rounds, technicians checking equipment, but beneath that thin veneer of order, something deeper pulsed. In the command center, Evelyn Graves stood beside Dr. Hassan, their eyes fixed on a wide glass screen where data swirled in delicate spirals. The patterns had shifted during the night, becoming more refined, more deliberate. No longer a stream of random symbols, but a flowing sequence that seemed intentional. Hassan tapped a key, highlighting a section of the intricate array. "They're responding," he said softly, "not just to sound, to us, to our choices." Evelyn nodded, her arms folded loosely. "They're watching how we listen before deciding what to say." The implications settled between them in a silence neither dared disturb. Behind them, Reyes entered with his usual measured stride, a tablet tucked beneath his arm. His gaze passed over the streams of shifting glyphs before resting on Evelyn. "Satellite telemetry confirms anomalous signals converging over this sector," he reported. "Nothing aggressive, no crafts, no heat signatures, just frequency shifts. Like they're focusing here." Evelyn exchanged a glance with Hassan. "How many satellites?" 17 civilian, 4 military. Reyes' tone held no surprise, only quiet confirmation. "Every eye in the sky that can listen is listening." Evelyn breathed in slowly. The world beyond their desert sanctuary was beginning to notice, though it had no idea what it was seeing. The secrecy they'd wrapped around Area 51 for decades was thinning, less by exposure than by inevitable gravity. The unknown was calling, and the world was starting to hear. Hassan stepped forward, gesturing toward the glyph sequence. "There's a loop here," he murmured, tracing a finger across the glass. "A pattern repeating every 2 hours, synchronized with our atmospheric readings. It's like they're waiting for a response, a specific kind of response." Reyes frowned slightly. "Like a code?" Hassan shook his head, his voice low. "Like a choice." Evelyn stared at the flowing symbols, feeling the faint hum that always accompanied them, a resonance more felt than heard. Her mind drifted back to the figure in the chamber, the gentle presence that had not spoken in words but had been unmistakably alive. They weren't demanding. They weren't instructing. They were offering. A soft chime sounded from the console. Hassan tapped a command and the screen shifted, displaying a new pattern. The glyphs folded into an elegant, spiraling loop, and then paused. The pulse that followed felt almost like a heartbeat, slow and deliberate. Hassan's voice was soft, reverent. "They're asking." Evelyn stepped closer. "For what?" He glanced at her, eyes steady. "For permission." The word sank into the room like a stone into still water. Reyes let out a quiet breath. "Permission. To do what?" Evelyn placed her hand gently on the console's edge. The hum deepened slightly at her touch, a soft acknowledgement rippling through the air. "To speak," she whispered. Hassan met her gaze. "How do we answer?" She looked around the quiet command center, the heart of a place built on walls and silence, now standing on the cusp of something no protocol could contain. With a calm hand, she pressed her palm flat against the console. "We say yes." The hum grew, soft at first, then swelling gently like the distant sound of a rising wind. The symbols on the screen pulsed in response, flowing outward in delicate spirals before folding inward again. The room brightened subtly, suffused with a glow that seemed to have no source, yet bathed every surface in a soft amber light. And then the voice came. Not in sound, not in language, but in thought. "We come with hands open." The message pressed gently into their minds. Not invasive, not commanding, an offering wrapped in understanding. "We do not seek to lead. We do not seek to rule. We seek to share." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the meaning settle within her. It felt right, as though a long-locked door had finally been opened, not by force, but by invitation. Hassan whispered, his voice thick with quiet awe. "They're asking for a dialogue." Reyes, ever the soldier, folded his arms, his voice softer than usual. "And what do we say?" Evelyn opened her eyes slowly. The answer came to her as naturally as breathing. "We say, we're listening." The hum softened, folding into a melody so faint it felt like a memory rather than a sound. And then the voice returned. "Then listen, and we will listen in return." The symbols on the screen dissolved gently into a soft wave of light, flowing across the console before fading into the air. Evelyn stood still, her heart steady, her mind clear. It was a beginning, a true beginning. Not a revelation shouted across the void, not a warning, but a conversation. Whispered in the quiet places where fear gives way to trust. Beyond the walls of the base, the desert lay quiet beneath the rising sun, its sands kissed by the first soft rays of morning. And in the hush that followed, Evelyn Graves understood fully, perhaps for the first time, that the real secret of Area 51 was not what had been hidden beneath its walls. It was what waited patiently beyond them, waiting for the world to be ready. And now, perhaps at last, it was. The sun climbed higher, casting its golden mantle across the silent expanse of Nevada's high desert. Yet within the subdued hum of Area 51's command center, the notion of morning seemed almost foreign, as though time itself had folded, pausing at the threshold of something long awaited. Evelyn stood before the silent console, her hand still resting lightly on its smooth surface. The echo of the thought, "We come with hands open," lingered softly in her mind, woven into her heartbeat like a refrain half-remembered from a forgotten dream. Around her, Hassan, Reyes, and Hollis remained quietly at their stations, each absorbed in silent contemplation. The communication, if one could even call it that, had not resembled any known protocol. There were no sound waves, no visual transmissions, no tangible evidence one could pass with scientific instruments. It was a resonance, a shared pulse that transcended voice or symbol. Connection. It was the simplest word Evelyn could find for it, and yet she knew even that word fell short. Dr. Hassan finally spoke, his voice low but unwavering. I've been running models, projecting the patterns they shared with us. The sequences aren't static. They shift in real time, as though responding to more than proximity. I think they're linked to us. Reyes leaned forward, arms braced on the edge of the console. To us how? Biometrics? Hassan shook his head gently. Deeper, emotional response, cognitive state, maybe even intent. Hollis exhaled sharply, his arms folded across his chest. You're saying it reads our thoughts? Evelyn turned her eyes toward the display, watching the soft afterglow fade into the console's dark glass. Not rids, senses, like how we sense the meaning behind a look or the weight behind a silence. The words settled in, soft but unshakable. Reyes gave a slow nod. So, we're past hiding. There's no curtain left. Evelyn met his gaze, calm and steady. There never was a curtain, only the walls we built around ourselves. The hum in the room faded to a soft, resonant quiet, a pause that felt almost alive. Hassan reached forward, fingers brushing the console with a gentleness more suited to a sacred relic than a machine. I think they're waiting for the next step. Hollis arched a brow. Which is? Evelyn closed her eyes, listening not to the room, but to the silence within herself. They showed us their intent. Now, they want to know ours. That evening, beneath a sky deepening into indigo, a gathering formed within the old observation hall. The room, once designed for high-clearance briefings and silent evaluations, now held a small circle of people drawn not by duty but by a shared moment no clearance level could explain. Evelyn, Hassan, Reyes, Hollis, and a handful of others who had felt the hum, who had witnessed the shift beyond science and secrecy. They gathered without ceremony, without rank, only purpose. The doors remained sealed, the windows darkened against the outside world. Evelyn stood at the center, her voice a quiet thread woven into the stillness. They reached out to us, not because we're leaders or soldiers, but because we listened. That's the only thing that matters now. Hassan nodded softly. We are the first to listen without fear, Reyes added, and maybe the first willing to answer without arrogance. The small circle remained silent, each absorbing the gravity of the moment. Hollis, his stern features softening beneath the soft light, met Evelyn's gaze. So, what do we say? Evelyn breathed in slowly. We say we wish to understand, and we're willing to meet, not as conquerors, not as subjects, but as equals. A soft murmur passed through the gathered few. Hassan leaned forward slightly. Do you think they'll trust that? Evelyn smiled faintly. They didn't come here demanding trust, they came offering it. The truth of her words settled gently into the room, a calm that reached deeper than mere understanding. It was a peace born not of treaties or declarations, but of a simple, shared choice, to meet the unknown with openness, not walls. Reyes gave a slow nod. Then let's give them our answer. Under the hush of night, the response was crafted, not in language nor code, but in the only way the presence beyond the veil seemed to understand, with intent. The chamber beneath the old hangar welcomed them again, its air soft with the lingering hum of silent conversation. Evelyn stood at its heart, surrounded by the quiet circle of listeners. The harmonics emitter was reactivated, its soft pulses resonating gently into the air, and together they spoke. Not with voices, not with instruments, but with the steady, deliberate openness of heart and thought. We see you, we listen, we wish to understand. The response was not written, it was not transmitted, it was simply felt, woven into the quiet pulse of the chamber, carried on the silent currents that stirred softly beneath the skin of the world. The air shimmered gently, folding around them with a warmth that felt almost like an embrace. And then the answer came. Not a message, not a symbol, but a presence. Soft, patient, listening. Evelyn closed her eyes, allowing the moment to settle fully within her. In the silent chorus of shared thought, she felt it. A quiet, profound understanding that transcended all the fears and walls humanity had built around itself. The conversation had begun, not with answers, but with trust. And beneath the silent desert sky, the unseen waited, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as fellow travelers in a universe far larger, far older, and far more beautiful than any had dared to imagine. Area 51 stood quiet beneath the stars, not as a fortress of secrets, but as a doorway. A place where, at last, two worlds had begun to meet. And in the hush that followed, Evelyn Graves whispered softly into the quiet. We are ready. Beneath the low-lit chamber, in that breathless pause between one heartbeat and the next, Evelyn Graves felt the weight of centuries lifting, not in a burst of revelation, but in a quiet surrender of fear. The response had been given, not with speeches or grand gestures, but in the silent language of trust, and now something stirred beyond the veil. Around her, the chamber remained hushed, its smooth walls reflecting faint ripples of soft light that seemed woven into the air itself. Dr. Hassan stood at the console, his fingers resting lightly on the interface, eyes closed in a quiet communion with the silent hum that flowed gently through the room. Reyes stood at Evelyn's right, his usual edge softened into calm vigilance. And Hollis, his arms folded loosely, leaned back against the far wall, watching, waiting, not with suspicion, but with something closer to guarded hope. The hum shifted, not louder, not sharper, simply different. Evelyn felt it before she heard it, a gentle ripple that stirred something deep within her chest. It moved like a soft wind, brushing the inner walls of the mind, carrying with it no words, no images, only a sense of presence. A presence so vast and quiet it felt like standing on the edge of an ocean at dawn. Hassan opened his eyes slowly. "It's happening." Evelyn gave a soft nod. She did not ask him what it was. She knew. They all did. The harmonics deepened, folding into a soft, layered resonance that wrapped around the chamber like an unseen tide. And then, within the glow, shapes began to emerge. Not forms, not figures, but patterns. Spiraling fractals of light, delicate as lace, unfolded in the air before them. They hovered, shifting gently, moving with a grace that spoke of neither machine nor mind, but something beyond both. Hassan's voice came as a whisper. "They're answering." Evelyn watched the spirals weave slowly, their motion unhurried, their presence neither imposing nor evasive. It was like watching a living thought, unfolding in soft waves. The patterns moved in harmony with the pulses of the harmonics array, shifting subtly whenever Hassan adjusted a tone or Evelyn moved her hand across the console's surface. It was a dance, slow and patient, a conversation carried not in language but in shared intention. And then it happened. The spirals coalesced, not into words, not into symbols, but into a single flowing form, a looped figure, soft and seamless, resembling both an infinity symbol and a gentle wave. It pulsed once, twice, and then settled into a slow, steady rhythm. Reyes leaned forward slightly. "Is it waiting?" Evelyn felt the answer before she spoke. "It's matching us." Hassan murmured, his gaze never leaving the floating form. A mirror, not to reflect us, but to join us. They watched, breath held, as the form drifted closer, until it hovered directly before Evelyn's outstretched hand. Without thinking, without fear, she extended her fingers toward it. The light shimmered gently, folding around her hand with the softness of a whispered breeze. A warmth filled her chest, calm, steady, profound. And in that quiet connection, understanding unfolded within her like the slow bloom of dawn. They were not here to lead, nor to instruct, nor to impose. They were here to learn, to meet, to understand. The presence whispered within her, not in words but in the purest form of knowing. "We reach because you opened. We listen because you listen. We meet because you are willing." Tears pricked gently at the corners of Evelyn's eyes, not from fear nor awe, but from a simple, quiet gratitude. The centuries of silence, the years of secrecy, the weight of fear that had cloaked Area 51, all of it, now folding away into something new. She whispered softly, her voice barely a breath. "We are willing." The form pulsed gently as if smiling. Hassan placed his hand gently upon the console beside her. "They're learning us as we learn them." Reyes gave a faint nod, his eyes fixed on the floating form. This is how it starts." Hollis finally spoke, his voice low but steady. Not with a war, but with a handshake. Evelyn smiled softly, her hands still resting within the gentle glow, and a willingness to listen. The room fell into a hush once more. A hush alive with the quiet symphony of something ancient and vast, unfolding gently into the world. Outside, the desert night deepened into soft indigo, stars twinkling faintly in the boundless sky. Within the chamber, humanity's first true conversation with the unknown continued, not in words nor in data, but in a shared, silent language older than fear and deeper than time. And as the soft glow embraced them all, Evelyn Graves knew, with a calm certainty that filled every corner of her heart. This was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far greater. A quiet, steady unfolding, whispered gently between the stars and the listening hearts of those who dared, at last, to meet the own with open hands. The days had grown hot and unrelenting over the Nevada desert, a stretch of land so barren and forsaken that even the winds seemed hesitant to linger. There, amidst the heat-shimmered plains and sun-bleached stones, the whispers of what lay beneath the arid crust stirred more than the air. With each dawn's arrival, an invisible curtain fell heavier over the sands, drawing a thin veil between what was known and what remained cloaked in secrecy. It was late in the autumn of 1976 when Simon Alderidge, a quiet man with an inconspicuous life, found himself drawn by forces he could neither understand nor resist to the edges of a mystery that had until then remained a mere curiosity whispered among locals. Simon was no soldier, no government agent, nor an eager journalist seeking fame. He was a cartographer, one whose passion for mapping remote, forgotten places had led him deep into terrains untouched by the casual traveller. His work, often solitary and contemplative, carried him to places where time itself seemed to drowse. He had come west under the pretense of charting a series of minor tectonic shifts, according to geological circles, had rendered the western desert unstable. But Simon harboured a quiet suspicion, born from patterns in old survey maps, and his own unease at how the desert's very landscape seemed to shift in ways subtle yet unnatural, as though the earth itself concealed a breathing, restless heart beneath its cracked skin. In the weeks leading to his arrival at the fringes of the restricted zones near Groom Lake, what the world called Area 51, Simon's days were filled with the soft scratch of pencil over paper and the weight of the sun upon his shoulders. Yet it was during the evenings, when the sky surrendered its last hues to night, that strange sounds often reached his ears. Low, distant hums, vibrations that trembled beneath his feet like a heartbeat buried in the ground. One evening, as the wind carried whispers of static and faint pulses that seemed to ripple in the air, Simon traced his route toward an abandoned outpost on the map, a marker he suspected hadn't been updated in decades. The locals had spoken of it with vague references, calling it the listening post, though no one he met could say what had been listened for. The post was little more than a crumbling tower of rusted steel, half swallowed by sand dunes and time itself. Its skeletal remains seemed harmless enough, but as Simon drew near, the ground beneath his boots felt wrong. He would later struggle to explain the sensation. It was as though the earth no longer obeyed its natural firmness and instead softened underfoot with a faint, elastic give. Inside the skeletal frame of the outpost, amid the wind-worn equipment and debris of a forgotten watch, Simon found a hatch. It was half buried beneath the detritus of weathered crates and sand, its metal unmarked by the rust that claimed the rest of the tower. When he brushed away the dust, his fingers tingled as though the air around the hatch held a soft current of energy. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and a silent dread he did not yet understand, Simon worked the wheel lock with cautious hands. The mechanism yielded without resistance, a silent, almost willing surrender. As the hatch groaned open, a breath of cool, sterile air whispered from below, unsettling the desert's oppressive heat. A narrow staircase led into a shaft that spiraled downward, its walls lined with panels of faintly glowing metal, unlike anything Simon had ever seen. The light that softly pulsed from within the panels had no discernible source, no bulbs, no fixtures, just a gentle, rhythmic pulse that seemed almost organic. As Simon descended, the sounds of the desert faded, replaced by a hush so absolute it pressed against his eardrums. There, in that strange silence, he became aware of the faintest hum resonating from the walls, a sound that felt less heard than sensed, as though vibrating gently against the bones within his skull. At the bottom of the staircase, a corridor stretched forward, its walls smooth and seamless, bearing no marks of human construction. The air was cool, holding a scent not of earth or metal, but something subtler, a sterile sharpness like ozone after a storm. The corridor opened into a chamber vast and domed, its ceiling lost in shadow. Embedded within the walls were structures that defied simple description. Shapes, both geometric and fluid, shifted and shimmered with soft luminescence, changing subtly as Simon's eyes tried to focus on them. And there, at the centre of the chamber, stood what could only be described as a vessel. Unlike the sleek depictions from pulp novels and fevered reports of flying discs, this craft bore no sharp edges, no seams, nor visible propulsion. It was an elongated oval, its surface dark yet shimmering faintly, as though reflecting a light source unseen. Simon stepped closer, heart hammering with a mixture of fear and a strange reverence. The air grew subtly cooler, denser as he approached. When he reached out, a gesture almost instinctual, his fingers halted inches from the vessel's skin, stopped not by his will but by a soft resistance, as though a barrier of unseen force pushed gently against his hand. Then came the voice. It was not a sound in the traditional sense, but a presence within his mind, a whisper both foreign and achingly familiar, resonating not in his ears but deep within his consciousness. The words, if they could be called that, unfolded gently, wrapped in layers of calm. You have seen beyond the veil not meant for your eyes, but you are here, and so you are chosen. Simon froze, breath shallow, the pulse in his ears louder than the silent chamber around him. He did not know what it meant, who spoke, or what unseen force had reached into the quiet places of his mind. But with those words, a veil lifted from his perception. He became keenly aware that he was not standing before a mere machine. This vessel, this presence, was alive, and it had waited, beneath the sands, beneath the weight of secrecy and silence for him. Simon stood unmoving, every breath shallow as if the very air had thickened around him. The presence, neither voice nor thought but something woven from both, lingered in the silent chamber, wrapping itself around his senses with a gentle, persistent pressure. Time lost its grip. The rhythms of his heart slowed until each beat echoed within the vast emptiness like the soft toll of a distant bell. For a long while there was nothing more, no command, no explanation. Only the steady hum of the chamber walls, the faint shimmer of the vessel's surface, and the awareness, a growing, undeniable certainty, that Simon was no longer merely an observer. He took a step closer. The resistance he'd felt before remained, but it softened, yielding just enough to let his hand hover inches from the vessel's curved skin. Beneath his fingers, though he did not touch it, pulsed a rhythm. It resonated faintly, not unlike a heartbeat, though slower, more measured, as if it moved to the tempo of a life not bound by human flesh. Then, as softly as a breath on still water, a ripple stirred across the vessel's dark surface. It did not move, not in the way matter obeys force or command. Rather, it shifted, its very substance seeming to rearrange itself with liquid grace. A thin thread of light emerged from its core, unwinding slowly like a silver filament floating upward through the dense air. Simon watched, mesmerized, as the filament curled and wove in the air before him. It formed no recognizable shape at first, only patterns that hinted at symbols just beyond comprehension. The longer he stared, the more they began to make sense, not through language but through meaning that unfolded directly in his mind. Not visitors, not invaders, but keepers. The words echoed within him, not in sound but in sensation. An understanding pressed gently upon the soft fabric of his thoughts. The vessel, or perhaps the intelligence within it, conveyed images in soft fragments, glimpses of vast star fields, of worlds spinning in the quiet cradle of distant suns, of beings, not wholly physical, gliding between realms of matter and energy. They had come to Earth not as conquerors, nor as explorers, but as guardians of a fragile balance. A stewardship ancient beyond reckoning. Long before human memory stretched its earliest roots into the soil, long before the first spark of fire danced in a hunter's hand, they had watched, silent, distant, unseen. Yet something had changed. Simon felt a tightening within his chest, a pressure that mirrored the growing gravity of the images that now flickered like soft lantern light within his mind. Visions of human hands, greedy, curious, fearful, reaching into places they did not understand, of machines tearing open Earth's skin, of lights splitting the sky, weapons crafted to unmake the very world they were born to protect. And then, the image of a chamber beneath the sands. This chamber, hidden, sealed away, not by the visitors, but by men. Men who had found it long ago and sought to claim its secret. Simon's mind reeled as understanding took root. The stories he'd heard, the rumors whispered by those bold or foolish enough to linger near the desert's forbidden heart, of crafts captured, of strange beings dissected in the sterile rooms of hidden labs, held but a sliver of the truth. They had not captured invaders, they had imprisoned stewards. The soft hum of the chamber deepened, vibrating gently against Simon's ribs. The filament of light drifted closer, weaving a slow spiral around his outstretched hand. It hovered there, expectant. We do not command. We do not possess. We choose, and are chosen. The presence settled into a quiet, waiting calm. There was no force behind it, no compulsion, only an offering. A doorway opened not by power, but by willing heart. Simon felt the weight of it, a choice pressing gently upon him. He could turn away, seal the hatch, walk back into the sunlit desert, and let the world continue its slow march towards secrets half-known and dangers wholly misunderstood. Or he could take a single step beyond the veil, into a truth hidden not by conspiracy, but by the quiet fear of those unable to understand. A trembling breath escaped him. He reached forward, his fingers brushing the soft light. The instant contact was made. The vessel's hum deepened into a low, resonant chord, not loud, but so rich it seemed to fill the very air with a living warmth. And in that moment, Simon felt it. A tide of memory, thoughts not his own, experiences layered like soft threads upon his mind, washed over him with a tenderness that brought tears unbidden to his eyes. He saw the birth of stars, the gentle swirl of cosmic winds shaping newborn worlds, the silent vigil of watchers who had loved a fragile planet enough to remain unseen. He saw, too, the folly of men, how fear twisted curiosity into control, how wonder was shackled beneath the weight of secrecy. Yet amidst it all, he glimpsed hope. A fragile, flickering hope that perhaps in one heart at least, the Guardians could be known not as threats, nor as myths, but as fellow keepers of a delicate world. The filament dissolved gently against his skin, vanishing like mist into morning air. The presence within the chamber softened, retreating from his mind with a final whisper that lingered in the quiet edges of his soul. You are the bridge, if you choose to stand. The chamber fell silent once more, the hum fading into a peaceful stillness. The vessel remained as it had been, silent, unmoving, its surface dark yet alive with a faint inner light. Simon stood in the quiet, the weight of choice resting not as a burden, but as a quiet companion within his heart. Above him, the world turned, unaware that beneath the sands of an ancient desert a man had touched the edge of a truth long hidden in shadows, and the silence waited, patient as the stars. Night had fallen deep and silent over the Nevada desert when Simon finally stirred from the chamber beneath the sands. He emerged into the cool hush of the arid wind, his heart carrying the weight of a secret too vast for words. The stars above blinked softly against the canvas of a midnight sky, indifferent witnesses to the quiet awakening of a man forever changed. He stood for a long while, staring at the barren landscape stretched out before him, its rocky skin kissed only by starlight and the faint shimmer of distant military outposts. The desert remained unchanged, untouched by the gravity of what stirred beneath its surface. But within Simon, a storm of thoughts swirled in slow, quiet eddies, weaving a tapestry of wonder, dread, and an inexplicable peace. By dawn, he had packed his few belongings into the canvas satchel slung across his shoulder. He left no trace of his presence near the forgotten outpost, no footprints in the sand, no stray papers or markings upon the earth. The desert kept its secrets well, and Simon now understood that he, too, must learn the art of silence. The journey back to civilization unfolded in a quiet haze. The hum of the road beneath his tires, the endless ribbon of highway winding between desolate plains, all of it seemed surreal, distant, as though he moved through a dream he could neither leave nor fully wake from. The world bustled on with its petty worries and hurried lives, blissfully unaware of the quiet enormity he carried within him. But dreams, Simon would soon learn, have a way of bleeding into reality. A week passed before the first shadow crossed his path. He noticed it first as a pattern, a certain black sedan that trailed his movements through small Nevada towns, appearing once in a gas station reflection, then again outside a nondescript motel. The car never lingered long enough to raise alarm, never approached with open hostility. Yet its presence wove an uneasy thread through his waking hours. By the second week, the shadow grew bolder. Men in crisp, unmarked suits began to appear in the peripheries of his vision, calm, silent, always observing. They spoke to no one. They bought nothing. Yet Simon knew with the cold certainty of instinct that they watched him not as a person of interest, but as a vessel of information they intended to control. He began to travel more cautiously, choosing routes off the beaten path, sleeping in the back of his truck rather than in predictable lodgings. It mattered little. The shadows remained, never chasing, never threatening, but always there, like patient fishermen waiting for the right moment to draw in their net. One evening, as he rested beneath the skeletal arms of an ancient Joshua tree, Simon felt the shift. The air around him grew subtly heavier, the wind stilling with unnatural abruptness. From the dark horizon, a soft hum began to rise, not mechanical, not earthly. It vibrated gently against his skin, stirring the fine hairs upon his arms. He rose slowly, heart steady despite the chill that gripped his spine. From beyond the ridge, a soft glow bled into the night sky, its pale light neither harsh nor flickering. It grew brighter with each passing moment, resolving into a form that hovered in absolute silence, an oval silhouette, dark yet pulsing with an inner radiance that seemed alive. The vessel. It descended with the grace of a falling feather, its form settling mere feet from where Simon stood. He watched, unmoving, as a soft ripple passed over its surface. From its centre, a figure emerged, tall, slender, not wholly human, yet draped in the semblance of a form Simon could almost comprehend. The being bore no face in the traditional sense, but where eyes might have been, two gentle orbs of soft light regarded him with a calm, unwavering gaze. No words passed between them, none were needed. In that silent exchange, Simon understood. The watchers, those quiet beings beneath the desert sands, had seen the net closing around him. They had come, not to intervene with force nor to spirit him away, but to offer a choice once more. To stand within the storm that would surely come, or to step beyond the reach of those who sought to bind what could not be caged. Simon took a slow breath and nodded. The figure inclined its head, a gesture of silent accord. The vessel shimmered faintly, a doorway of soft light unfurling at its side. No compulsion pressed upon him, no invisible hand guided his steps. He moved of his own accord, drawn by a quiet certainty that had bloomed within him since the first whisper in the chamber. As his foot crossed the threshold of the vessel, the air shifted, folding gently around him with a sensation neither warm nor cold. The world outside faded, its colours softening, until all that remained was the soft hum of the craft's living heart. Inside, the chamber was vast, lit by soft currents of light that flowed like water along seamless walls. Shapes drifted in the periphery of his vision, beings not unlike the one who had greeted him, their forms fluid, shifting gently with the rhythm of the vessel's pulse. One stepped forward, a presence familiar not by face but by the soft resonance Simon felt within his mind, the same that had whispered to him beneath the desert. "You have chosen. The path begins." A soft calm settled over him, deep and profound. As the vessel lifted silently into the starlit sky, Simon looked once, only once, back at the sleeping world below, a world balanced precariously on the edge of its own blind ambitions, and with that final glance he let go of the fear that had shadowed his steps. The night closed around him, silent and serene. The journey had only begun. The sky unfolded like an endless velvet sea as the vessel ascended, its silent course drawing Simon away from the familiar earth and into a realm where time and distance blurred into something vast, unknowable, and yet astonishingly gentle. Within the craft's living heart, no vibration stirred beneath his feet, no tremor marked the passage from the world of men to the silent corridors of the unseen. It was as though the vessel moved not through the sky but through folds of reality itself, gliding along unseen threads that cradled it beyond the grasp of earthly laws. Simon stood within a chamber neither cold nor warm, neither light nor dark. The space seemed alive, responsive to his very thoughts, its walls shimmering faintly with patterns that shifted in harmony with his heartbeat. Around him, the beings moved in slow, graceful motions, their forms fluid, sometimes nearly formless, yet always accompanied by an aura of calm so profound it quieted the most restless corners of his soul. One approached, perhaps the same presence that had reached into his mind beneath the desert sands, though he could not be certain. It stood before him, its outline flowing with soft light, and though no words were spoken, a gentle clarity settled within Simon's thoughts. "What you have seen is but the threshold. Now you will understand." The chamber around them began to shift. the patterns upon its walls unwinding like delicate strands of thread. Slowly, images formed, not upon screens or projections, but in the very air, as if reality itself had softened to allow glimpses of what lay hidden beyond the veil. Simon watched in silence as the first vision unfolded. A world, blue and green, much like his own, rotated slowly in the void, its surface alive with the vibrant dance of oceans and forests. Above it hung silent watchers, vessels like the one he now stood within, their forms drifting in quiet orbits far beyond the gaze of that world's inhabitants. From their vantage, the watchers observed as civilizations rose, fell, and rose again, each cycle marked by discovery, by wonder, by the ever-present shadow of fear. He saw how, time and again, the watchers intervened not with force, nor with grand displays, but with subtle guidance. A nudge here, a whispered dream there, quiet enough that the beings below believed their progress entirely their own. They had always intended it thus, for what was growth if not chosen? What was understanding if not earned? The vision shifted. He saw another world, this one barren, cracked by war and poisoned by the folly of its own children. The watchers had come there too, but their presence had gone unheeded, their warnings met with suspicion, their silent overtures twisted into myths of conquest. In that place, secrecy had become armor, and fear had festered into destruction. Simon felt a soft ache rise within him, a sadness that belonged neither wholly to him nor wholly to the beings beside him. It was a shared mourning, for a world lost to the quiet tragedy of misunderstanding. Not all can be saved, not all will choose the path. The images faded, replaced now by a vision Simon recognized, the Earth, his Earth, spinning quietly in the vast embrace of space, its surface bathed in the gentle glow of its sun. And there, orbiting just beyond sight, moved shapes subtle enough to be mistaken for shadows. Vessels, watchers, silent, patient. Simon understood then what no whispered rumor, no classified document, no fearful tale of government secrets could ever truly capture. The watchers had never been invaders. They had never come seeking dominion, nor had they fallen from the sky as victims of human curiosity. They had been here, always, bound not by conquest but by guardianship, a silent promise woven into the fabric of worlds that dared to rise toward the stars. The chamber grew still. The visions faded, leaving only the soft hum of the vessel and the quiet awareness that pressed gently against Simon's heart. The being before him remained motionless, yet its presence deepened, carrying with it a question, not spoken, not demanded, but offered with the tenderness of an open hand. Will you bear witness? Will you be the voice they will not silence? Simon felt no weight, no burden, only a calm certainty that had begun to take root long before he set foot in this vessel. He nodded, a small, simple gesture, and with it the presence seemed to soften, its light glowing faintly warmer. The vessel shifted once more, the walls rippling gently as the fabric of reality stirred around them. Through an opening that seemed to fold itself into existence, Simon glimpsed a world unlike any he had known. A place of soft lights and silent cities, where beings of light and shadow moved with a grace untouched by fear or haste. He understood. This was not exile, nor was it escape. It was the beginning of a path walked by few, a journey not of secrets, but of understanding. He would return to his world in time, when the shadows no longer bound him with silent chains. And when he did, he would carry within him the quiet truth no walls of secrecy could contain. For some truths, Simon realized, do not need to be shouted. They do not need to be believed by the many. They need only to be known by the few, those willing to listen, to see, to stand quietly amidst a world deafened by its own noise. As the vessel glided beyond the edge of the known, Simon closed his eyes and felt the calm settle within him. The journey would be long, the path uncertain. But for the first time in all the years he had wandered the silent edges of forgotten maps, Simon Alderidge no longer felt alone. The watchers had chosen him, and in the quiet between heartbeats he had chosen them.